Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this, the first of our jobs forums for the city of Darebin. We'll be running through some details, some housekeeping and some details of the event very shortly. And we'll also be hearing from our general manager community who will set the scene for the discussion this afternoon. And then we'll be meeting our panelists. But I'd like to start things off in the traditional way by welcoming Aunty Julie Axford, a Wurundjeri elder, to lead us through a welcome to country. Thank you, Aunty Julie. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this, the first of our jobs forums for the city of Darebin. We'll be running through some details, some housekeeping and some details of the event very shortly. And we'll also be hearing from our general manager community who will set the scene for the discussion this afternoon. And then we'll be meeting our panelists. But I'd like to start things off in the traditional way by welcoming Aunty Julie Axford, a Wurundjeri elder, to lead us through a welcome to country. Thank you, Aunty Julie.
Thank you. Woman-jika, everybody. Woman-jika meaning welcome. My name is Aunty Julie and I'm an out of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people. And in recognition of doing my welcome, I'd like to pay my respects to my elders past, present, future, if there happens to be any elders here today. I would also like to welcome all distinguished guests, all Aboriginal people and everyone else here today as well. The Wurundjeri Wurrung tribe consists of three families, the Nevins, the Terriks and the Wandans, and I'm part of the Nevin family. The three families all descend from one woman called Annie Borat, which makes us one big family. Annie Borat is the younger sister of William Borat, a pioneer for Aboriginal people in the 19th century, fighting for equality and land rights. I'm here today to welcome you all onto the land of my ancestors. We call the land within our tribal boundaries our country. The Kulin Nation, Kulin meaning man, is made up of 5 groups. They are the Wurundjeri Wurrung, Boonwurrung, Tanarong, Watharong, and Djajarong. Many thousands of years ago, if an Aboriginal person from another tribe wanted to cross our boundary, they would have to sit at the boundary and wait for the Narragadah or an elder to come past to give them permission to cross, and this could take up to months before they could get that permission. Traditional Aboriginal culture was highly territorial and visitors risked a violent reprisal for crossing a tribal or clan boundary without this permission. And this is how a welcome to country originated in our culture. Traditionally, being welcomed onto country meant you respected Bunjil's law. Bunjil, the wedge-tailed eagle, is our creator and Wa the crow is our protector. And as long as you looked after the country, you had access to our waterways and our land resources. And when you enter our country, we ask that you respect our resources, our fauna, flora, and water, as they are very special to us. And when you leave, we ask that you leave it the way you found it. The Wurundjeri name comes from the Manigum, which is common along the Birrarung. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung traditional laws state that their name combines the word Warren, meaning Manigum, and Jiri, a species of the grub found in a tree, and the word therefore to mean the Witchetty Grub people. And Wurrung is our language spoken. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people used to call the Yarra River the Birrarung, rivers of mist and shadows. The Yarra River and the surrounding wetlands were areas provided the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people with the abundance of natural resources. The Yarra marks the centre of the Wurundjeri country, unlike today where the river marks a township boundary. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people saw it as a centrepiece, accessing both sides of the river, often felling a large gum tree to act as a bridge across the water. The bark of the large gum trees were cut from the trunks and shaped into canoes, such that we could fish and hunt, travel along the river with ease. These trees today are known as the scar trees. The Yarra River and the Mary Creek were meeting places for the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung and their other cultural language groups. The meetings were for social contact, ceremonies, marriages, deciding issues in tribal law, and trading axe heads, reed spears, and possum skin cloaks. Each day was spent hunting kangaroos, emus, possums, catching fish and eels, and gathering edible plants. There was plenty of food to be hunted or gathered, and the rest of the day was spent talking and storytelling. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung had a religious relationship to their land, participating in corroborees and sacred ceremonies on the Yarra River and the Mary Creek. They played games like wrestling, throwing boomerangs, and playing manguk. Two sides played this ball game, a round ball made up of rolled possum skin tied up with kangaroo sinew and was kicked high into the air. Traditionally, in the summer months, was spent on the banks of the Yarra River and the Mary Creek. The proximity to the Mary Creek may have been important, as they were reliable resources despite the lack of rainfalls during the summer months. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung connection to land underpinned by cultural and spiritual values vastly different to of the Europeans. The Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung belonged to the land. They did not live in a permanent settlement, but rather camped for periods within defined clan boundaries, where food was plentiful, and moved on when the land needed to be rejuvenated. The land provided all the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people needed: food, water, medicine, shelter, and they treated it with respect due to being such a provider. So I'd just like to say that I hope that you have a successful day today. And on behalf of my elders, I would like to say, Woman Jeka Wurundjeri Bullock Yemen Kundi Beek, welcome to the land of the Wurundjeri people. And I'd just like to hand over to Shady. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful words, Aunty Julianne. I would like to personally acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people, who are the traditional owners of the land that I am on today. It's the land that I've called home for the last 30 years as well. I'm very grateful for that opportunity actually to call this land my home as well now. I recognize the continuing connection to the land, water and culture. I also would like to acknowledge our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues and thank them for their contribution in our community and for the growth of our community as well. Good afternoon and Eid Mubarak as well, and welcome to all to the first series of jobs forums designed to assist in getting Darebin back to work. Before I go any further as well, I would like to acknowledge our Councillor and Mayor Lena Messina as well, who has been able to join us today as well. So thank you for making the time, Mayor. Each of these forums will shine a light on the challenges and opportunities that exist in the employment of disadvantaged and marginalised groups. Today, this forum will focus on employment for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and those from multiculturally diverse and newly arrived backgrounds. The forums are also designed to stimulate conversation, connection and partnerships between employers, service and support providers, and training organizations that we hope will provide the catalyst to reversing the impact of COVID on our community. It's obviously harder when we are online, but this impact, I suppose, during this period of time, we are feeling daily as well, and our community is experiencing that daily during lockdown. Over the last 12 months, unemployment in Darebin more than doubled. Darebin found itself reporting the second highest unemployment levels of any local government areas in the inner metropolitan Melbourne employment region. Particular groups were hit harder than most, with caseload numbers doubling for CALD community and for young people under the age of 25. Additionally, there was a 250% increase in caseload numbers for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. However, many jobs, particularly those in sectors such as hospitality and food services, go unfilled, with the responses to advertise vacancies at record low levels. Recognizing the complexity of the employment challenge, all levels of government have implemented responses. The federal government has funded the Local Jobs Coordinator program. This brings together expertise, resources, and funding to focus on creating employment opportunities, meeting local employer demands, and better skills local job seekers. We have representatives from that program with us today. The Victorian State Government introduced the Working for Victoria program. The program assisted in reemploying many of those who found themselves out of job in our projects and in contracts. Now, through Jobs Victoria, it continues to provide a structured services for job seekers and employers. Though Job Victoria's Employment Service, or JVES programs, several of which cover Darebin, and again, we have representation from those programs with us in this afternoon. Darebin Council is also meeting the challenge head-on. In the recently endorsed council plan, Darebin committed to stimulating local solutions and catalyzing jobs at a scale, including for people who face multiple employment barriers, and focusing on the jobs for the future, which will make Darebin's employment base more resilient to future shocks. This will be achieved with our partners who include job advocates, who will support and mentor job seekers, particularly those in highly disadvantaged categories, to build their capability to re-enter the workforce. There are 10 who will support Darebin along with our neighbouring councils, many of whom are in attendance today. The Brotherhoods of St. Lawrence, to specifically focus on re-engaging Darebin residents back to work and supporting Darebin-based employers to access a ready and willing workforce. Job Active and disability service providers. The skills and job centres, such as the one located at Melbourne Polytechnic. Group training organisations that support apprenticeships and traineeships, and the training organisation that help to upskill workers and look to partner with employers to tailor specific programs. The support infrastructure is definitively in place in Darebin, and all of it designed to turn numbers around. But this can only be effective if we all work together. That's where you come in. Today, we will be hearing from two amazing panels who will set the scene for what is happening in the areas they represent. And we invite and encourage you to participate, to listen, reflect, and ask questions, but most of all, to connect and share. In that spirit, we can all play a part in getting Darebin back to work. Thank you. And now I'll hand you back to Philip to talk to us through the what will be happening this afternoon.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much, Shadi, who is the Acting General Manager of Community with the City of Darebin. Yes, thank you very much for those words, and thank you also, Aunty Julie, for your inspiring words and for taking us through a guided tour of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and their contribution to our part of Melbourne. I too would like to also acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we are all meeting and gathering this afternoon. Where I'm calling from is lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and particularly to my Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues and friends who are joining us this afternoon. I'd also like to welcome all of those joining us from other diverse parts of our broad community and our diverse faith communities also to this event, and an Eid Mubarak to those celebrating in a very muted fashion this next couple of days. How this will work, we'll have two panels of speakers. The first we'll cross to in just a moment. We'll be talking about the challenges and opportunities that exist in our community for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Following that discussion, there will be space for you to raise questions in the Q&A function, and we can relay those to the panelists. The chat function we'll be using quite a different way. So what we'd encourage you to post into the chat room would be perhaps your name, contact details, because we really want to encourage people to have a dialogue, to connect with each other. This was always intended to be a live event, during which you would have had the opportunity to go across the room, shake hands, talk to people, connect in that way. So we're trying a version of that by encouraging you to post some details in the chat room, perhaps your LinkedIn account, perhaps some social media, so that you can connect up with each other. So that's how we're running things here this afternoon. Shadi has set the scene for us about why we're actually here. And it is all about making those connections, re-establishing those connections. It is very much about highlighting that there are still sectors of our community, even though employers are reporting to us, and when I say us, I'm talking about our economic development and recovery and resilience team with the City of Darebin, that it is very difficult to find people for employment. Still quite difficult to engage people. Jobs are going unfilled. Lots of jobs being advertised, can't find anyone. Yet still there are sectors of our community that are vastly underrepresented when it comes to employment opportunities. And two such communities are being highlighted here this afternoon. In just a minute, we'll be crossing over to our esteemed colleagues in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander space. And later, after a break, we'll also be hearing from some amazing speakers from the multicultural and newly arrived sectors. So without any further ado, and I don't want to talk for too long, particularly given that we've had a bit of a glitch, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tungutty man, Mr. Jimmy Kyle, who will be introducing us to the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander panel. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks very much, Phil. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge today that we are on I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people. Pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, especially Aunty Julie coming and doing our welcome this morning. Thank you so much. And I extend that, of course, to all my Aboriginal brothers and sisters here on our chat this afternoon, and to all our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters. Salam alaikum to all our Muslim community right now that are finding some time to join with us. We're much appreciated. We have a great panel today. So I also, sorry, before I forget protocols, I should acknowledge I am a Tungutty man and I pay my respect to my old people as well. We have a great panel this afternoon and we're looking at about 40 minutes of great conversation. So please help me in welcoming our panel members. Our first panel member, of course, is Scott McCartney. Scott, tell me if I'm wrong. Mati?
No, Wajabalik.
Wajabalik. Oh my goodness. I was thinking of your father, Uncle Tony. I was like, is he because you were from Balranald way up, originally up that way?
Yes, yeah. It was, our family was removed from Horsham and taken to New South Wales. And then they finally settled in Balranald. And,
I see. And folks, for those who can't tell from the big banner behind Scott, Scott does a huge amount of work with our community, but is the CEO of Kinaway Aboriginal Chamber of Commerce. So thanks, Scott. And I'm going to come back to you shortly. Our next panelist is Sarah Stewart, Kamilaroi woman, co-director of Indigenous Employment Partners, CEO also of Currency Print and Corporate Communications. And I'm going to drag out and make a big fuss over you. 2017 Joan Kieran Scholarship, which is won the scholarship, which is for Aboriginal female leaders, which Sarah definitely is, with more than 18 years of experience in the field. And I've got more people to embarrass Sarah, so I'm going to come back to you in a second. Our next panelist, Dalia Parker, Bunjima woman, originally from the Pilbara, Western Australia, working with the Indigenous Program Manager at Job Find Centres Australia, with nearly a decade of experience in this space. Like so many of the people, our panelists, that they've been doing this for a long time. They're the experts in the field. Dear friend of mine and an amazing woman that many of us will know, Liz Allen, a Wurundjeri woman, Dja Dja Wurrung woman, one of the 20 Aboriginal advisors on the Victorian Aboriginal Economic and Employment Committee, and that's supporting the government's new Aboriginal Economic Strategy for 2021, Director of Dja Dja Wurrung Clans Aboriginal Corporation and Dja Dja Wurrung Enterprises, and a member, of course, at Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation, with about 15 years of experience in this space. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our amazing panel. We are just so blessed to have you all here for a good yarn. Now, all the Aboriginal folks and Torres Strait Islander folks that are on this call, make sure you jump into the Q&A. Non-Indigenous people that are working in this space, jump in the Q&A and participate. But really, I guess we're going to kick it off. And I'd like to start with Liz, being a Wurundjeri woman and someone who I've got all the time in the world for. Can you tell us, and I'll get each of you to tackle this, but let's start with Liz. What are some of the challenges for those that are new to this space? What are some of the challenges for Aboriginal employment? A big, broad question.
Very broad. Thanks again for allowing me to participate and share my experience and knowledge and skills in this space to increase economic participation for our mobbing community. The challenges in this area, again, are really broad. It's been, I guess, an evolving issue of, I guess, underrepresentation of Aboriginal people in employment, and due to COVID, that's obviously increased. I actually do have some stats I wanted to present to you as well in a bit of a broad landscape, if that's okay. And that might just set the tone in terms of where we're at and where we are going in terms of the supports that everybody needs to kind of be aware of to lift the weight so that we can all prosper. I guess I just wanted to start with the landscape in terms of the population across Victoria. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander do represent 3.3% of the population. And it is growing, actually. ABS stats predict that it's growing. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population will increase at a rate to 2.3% annum over the next 5 years. So in comparison to non-Aboriginal Australians of around 1.5 to 1.8% for the same period. So we've got a fair bit of growth coming up, and around 55% are actually under the age of 24. So, with increasing populations, there comes more social challenges as well. In the Commonwealth landscape as well, it does predict that there's another 73,500 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that will reach the age of of working age in the next 7 years as well. So again, with the population growth, there's going to be some other challenges that are faced, that everyone faces. The unemployment rate across Victoria for Aboriginal people at the moment sits around the 17.7% mark. So again, that kind of gives you a bit of a snapshot. What's the challenges in comparison to other Australians are in terms of lower education, limited access to transport, criminal convictions, and locational disadvantage. We do have 50% of Aboriginal people in Victoria that live in the regions, and we still have, you know, what we would call rural or remote areas where our mob reside as well, that have limited access to lots of things. So, you know, on a positive, we've really seen a growth in terms of Commonwealth, state and local governments responding to this and implementing policies and targets, which are fantastic, to include Aboriginal businesses and Aboriginal people on the workforce, I guess, particularly around major transport infrastructure. So, you know, there's a whole lot of challenges, but I'll let the other panel members tap into a few of those as well. But I just thought I'd start with that kind of broad overview to give you that sense of where we're at, what we're facing, and probably, yeah, with our panelists get to understand some of the things that we're doing now.
Now, thanks very much, Liz, for setting the scene for us. I'm going to throw back to Brother Scott to get a bit of a perspective from the Aboriginal Chamber of Commerce perspective. What are you seeing that are the challenges for Aboriginal employment, Scott?
Yeah, I think so I'll give the lens through Indigenous businesses. So there was a study done back in 2012 which says Aboriginal businesses were 60 more times likely to employ people. So the Commonwealth government then created their Indigenous procurement policies, which then was designed to stimulate the sector, to then thinking that mob would actually employ more mob. I'm not sure where they got that figure from, because we did a recent survey of our members. We've got 388, I think it is, and over 75% of them actually didn't employ anybody directly. And when we're looking to the reasons for that, was because, one, they didn't have any meaningful long-term opportunities in business. It was sort of ad hoc stuff, and therefore didn't want to take the risk of employing people, because obviously that's another level of responsibility. I think another part of it too is, I know as an Aboriginal person growing up, you know, I never thought about being in business. I thought I had the opportunity to maybe finish high school, maybe, and I was the first person in my family actually to do that and to go to uni. But I thought the only opportunities were to work for local council, local government, state government, or go on the dole, or maybe work at the co-op or something. There wasn't really anything sort of in terms of aspiration, or that we're taught, or the way we were put into a corner is the way to think that there wasn't really much opportunity out there. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the younger people about realising the real opportunities out there. And then, like, I know we've had some people who have put employees on before, and someone who's new to the workforce, and it might be someone in their 30s or 40s, and they don't understand some of the protocols. And, you know, we had one in particular who advised that they were going to be sick, and because they thought they let down their employer, maybe they shouldn't come back to work the next day. Just those little things. So I think there's a lot of learning we need to, and learning we need to do with our young people in particular. But also make sure we are going to support an Indigenous business sector, that there are meaningful opportunities. You know, if you speak to most of our members, they were crazy busy last week for NAIDOC week, but this week they're not as busy. So they're not really getting those meaningful opportunities. So I think it's about understanding Aboriginal culture a little bit more, working with our younger people, and ensuring that we're helping create sustainable businesses.
Thanks very much, Scott. Dalia, I want to come to yourself. You're at the coalface. You're working with clients as they're coming in, trying to match people. You've got Scott in the industry trying to influence there. We're looking at, you know, we've heard from Liz the lay of the landscape, that there is uptake at a Commonwealth level, at a state level. There seems to be all the supports. What's happening when we get to the coalface? What are those barriers to employment for our people?
Thanks, Jimmy. Looking at our aspirants, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is that when they're being referred to an employment provider, is they're not being assessed correctly. We have our streams, which I think a lot of people online may be aware of it, our Stream A, Stream B and Stream C clients. A Stream A client might be someone who is fresh out of employment, doesn't need a lot of assistance to look for work, needs very minimal assistance. But as we know, some of those Stream A's come through and they haven't got suitable housing, there's AOD issues, there's criminal history, a lot more support is required. That's probably one of our first challenges in this space, is to be able to get that candidate to be assessed correctly so that we know how we should be servicing that individual. Second challenge that we're finding is that a lot of employers do come to employment services thinking that we are a recruitment agency and we can tick every box for them. But as we know, if we're dealing with unemployed, obviously there's some barriers that the individual needs to address. And that's what we're here to support them with, is that holistic mentorship program that we offer.
Thanks very much for your perspective. Let's shoot over to Sarah. You've heard the other panelists. I'd like to hear your perspective on what are some of those challenges that you're seeing in Aboriginal employment.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. I guess for us, we see it from almost a full circle perspective. Obviously, being a recruitment company for Indigenous employment, both for community orgs and also mainstream orgs. And coming from where we talk about, we work quite closely with job actives, with some of their caseloads and also community orgs to place them. I think the biggest barrier that we see the facing is similar to what Dali has talked about, is we may get some of our mob into work, but if there's not the adequate mentoring and support and education for that employer, then more than likely the placement will fall over. And so it's more around the capability and the capacity of not only the employer, but also the support for our people in those organisations, and making sure, because 9 times out of 10 they may be the first Aboriginal person, especially if we're talking about small business, to be in that organisation, or they may be the first Aboriginal person ever employed for that company. So just making sure that the employer has got the education and the knowledge and the supports, but also that the candidate also has the supports and the mentoring in place to ensure that, and what we talk about is the mentoring in their home, in their community and in their workplace, so they're not feeling like that they have to lose a part of their culture or a part of their community just to be placed in mainstream work. So I think that that's probably the biggest disconnect that we see. There's definitely the interest, as Liz and Scott have said, and government support for employment, and employers are wanting to do this, but they either don't know how, or they're scared how to do it, and they don't have the educations or the tools to be able to do it properly. And as we all know, there's only a small amount of organisations like ourselves and Liz and a few others in the panelists and Kinaway that can support. Yet there's a huge amount of organisations out there that want to do this. So it's just tapping them into the right organisations to help us support them, and then vice versa for our mob, making sure that they're supported in the placements when they are finding them.
Well said. Thank you very much. That leads me, I guess, to the next question, which I want our panelists to think about, and those in our Q&A section. And we might come back to Liz and start the ball rolling with, I guess, the flip side, the other side of the coin is, where are the opportunities? What are the opportunities? Whether we're hearing it from the business side of things, whether we're seeing it for our caseworkers or, you know, those on the coalface. There's Aboriginal employment, such a large conversation. Where are those opportunities? Liz, what are your perspectives on the opportunities going forward?
I think there's plentiful of opportunities, and given what Sarah was just saying, in terms of the organisational structures and understanding of employing Aboriginal people, and making sure that, you know, they've got the right policies and processes and practices embedded. So there's a whole lot of opportunities out there, and really good expertise and specialists that can help people. And I think also it's understanding that the flexibility in some of the recruitment practices, and understanding skill shortage areas. And we have a lot of work to do across Victoria, and we don't necessarily have all the expertise out there to do that work. So it's about investing in the workforce that organisations have, but also longer term, we're investing in industry and the skills that are needed to do work. But beyond that, it's investing in the prosperity of the people that make up our community and our economy. You know, we constantly hear about social challenges, and, you know, I was just reading something before around, you know, recidivism in our prisons, and, you know, 80% of our prisoners are, you know, expected to be unemployed on release, and 55% of them are homeless, and 55% will reoffend within a 2-year period because they're not the employment opportunities there to kind of, you know, so, you know, again, just having those, the awareness, understanding, flexibility, and the specialists to wrap around that support, and we can all just, yeah, make a difference. But yeah, we can't expect that we've got, you know, the gold platter and everyone's going to be happy with what they've got. This is hard work, and it's rewarding to make a difference to someone's life. Hope that answers the question.
It does, absolutely. It gives us a flavour for the rest of us to sort of think about. You know, we know that happy individuals make happy communities. We know it takes every win, it has a ripple effect through the community. I want to go back to Dalia, and from that case working perspective, where you're seeing the people come in through, hoping there's an opportunity, probably at times people that have faced some of the barriers Liz has talked about. Where are the opportunities that you're seeing?
Some of the, I guess, the opportunities that we're seeing is being able to connect with an individual, find out what other supports they have in place, and be able to connect with those supports as well. So what we do is we run what we call care team meetings. So we might have an individual that's just recently been released from prison. We work with their caseworker, we work with their housing worker, AOD specialist, GP, general counselling, and be able to work out how do we fill in the gaps to support this individual to employment. So employment is ultimately our end outcome. But if we can ensure that they've got a, you know, roof over their head and a strong support network around them, that's what's going to help them retain that employment once they take that next step.
And to Liz's point earlier, that, you know, it affects the recidivism rates. You know, we see more people staying in community because we're doing the basics right first, in an order that's driven by the needs of the individual, rather than perhaps the outcomes that might look good on paper for government or for others. So I want to springboard that back to Sarah. Sarah, you know, the work that you've been doing with the Indigenous employment partners, can you tell us some of the opportunities that you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. We're seeing, like we said, a variety across everything from big to small businesses, corporates, government, and all industries. So from construction right down to commercial window washing, There's entry-level opportunities within parks and gardens, a lot in and around the level crossing removals, where small businesses are getting involved, down to planting after obviously the constructions come down and things like that, through to cleaning, childcare. Gone are the days, in my belief and in my understanding, in what I deal with on a day-to-day basis, of just the opportunities being in, those very basic entry-level positions. We are approached on a regular basis from entry-level right through to executive level opportunities for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and across all sectors. So I think, now is the time, if people are wanting to get involved and wanting to increase their Aboriginal procurement through employment. Don't just think about this as I can start an admin assistant or a trainee. That's the opportunities that my business has. Think more broadly and think about your business as a whole, and where Aboriginal people could fit into that, because we have quite an extensive, skilled Aboriginal not only caseload but connections out there in community.
So not copious amounts of traineeships we can only do so many certificate 3s and 4s before we've sort of exhausted that space. So it's about that. It's about having a diverse response, lots of different entryways into the organisation or into a business. Scott, coming back to the business end of things, you offer such a unique perspective for a lot of people, that we're trying to find those relationships with business. We're trying to find more Aboriginal businesses, so we can get those sort of figures earlier mentioned, that the assumption at least that there was 60% more likely for an Aboriginal business to support First Nations people. Are the opportunities there? What are the opportunities that you're seeing that we need to know about?
Yeah, I think the opportunities I'm seeing at the moment are around some of the government projects and corporates wanting to do the right thing, but not knowing how to do it. And I say this all the time. I think 99% of people aren't racist. I think sometimes it's just they're scared to ask the awkward question. And I see that as an Aboriginal person that's actually worked in private enterprise for 17 years. I was always the token Aboriginal person, and that was a big pressure to have. So the idea is, how do we make businesses more culturally safe for Aboriginal people? It's not about just doing your cultural awareness training and celebrating, the key milestones of the year of NAIDOC Week and Reconciliation Week. It's about how you bring Aboriginal culture into your organisation as a part of the culture of the organisation. And that's why I think that those stats are in that 60 times more likely working with Aboriginal businesses, people work Aboriginal businesses employing Aboriginal people, is because they think it's going to be a culturally safe space. Now, we see a lot of work the government's doing out there, local government, Commonwealth government, state government, but we're actually doing the same thing all the time. We seem to be going around in circles. So we just need to think a little bit differently how we do this. And Liz made a really good stat. I don't think people realise that 50% of our population live regionally. Now, there's not going to be jobs regionally for all these people. So, okay, let's think how we do this differently. We're actually about to run a pilot with John Holland, where there's going to be some jobs in town here doing some construction work. And we're going to fly people out of communities. So whether it's Swan Hill, Mildura, and do like a FIFO approach. So they don't actually have to leave country. They can come down for 2 weeks, then go back for a week, have it off. And so taking that whole mining mentality. So again, something different, that people don't have to leave country and feel that disconnection. So I think it's just about thinking innovatively and how we can approach it differently, and throwing the traineeships and apprenticeships and out there just doesn't really cut the mustard anymore. And having these entry-level positions doesn't cut the mustard anymore, because some people might even just want to change careers. You might have an Aboriginal person who's 30 or 40 who wants to change careers and don't know how to go about that, don't have the right skill set yet. Now, there's not a lot of support for those people because they're not currently unemployed. So, okay, how do we address that? Well, we do treat them that we can actually skill them up and help them go into this new direction, because what it does, it creates a hole behind them for someone else to step into as well, an opportunity. So I think there's a few things we could do differently, but I know Liz has been traveling around the state and meeting with a lot of people from mob, councils, universities, to try and get a picture of what are some of the disablers. And we actually know the answers. We actually already know what they are. And, you know, I just think we just need to find a different way of approaching it, how to incentivize businesses. The one thing we're talking about at Kinaway, we have corporate partnerships, and we have about 40 corporates that pay us a fee to be a member, and we help them on their journey in Indigenous procurement. But now we're talking about giving them a Kinaway stamp that actually says they're an Indigenous safe workplace as well, and actually linking up with services like Sarah's to help mentor their employees. So again, thinking differently, that an Aboriginal person can say, well, that's a good place to work because Kinaway certify them as an Indigenous friendly place. So again, thinking innovatively, that's what we're going to start doing.
So I see, Liz, your head nodding quite a lot as the rest of the panel also began. Can I figure out what were you nodding along to? The comment around going round and round and round was kind of where I've seen a few people doing this one. What are your thoughts?
110% agree. I've been in this field for a very long time, and to be honest, nothing's changed. And the roundtables that I've recently facilitated across Victoria was where Commonwealth, state and local governments came together, and our service providers like TAFEs and community people that, you know, Aboriginal employment liaison officers and education officers. And so those forums really identified the same things that we've heard for 20 years. And I guess, I think it's time. The pendulum is actually moving where government, Victorian government, Commonwealth government, local governments, as big organisations, are shifting to make change. So I think it's really positive. How they do that and how it's influenced by Aboriginal people is still, you know, to be determined, I guess. But I think, you know, those roundtables identified to me, particularly Victorian government's willingness and intention to do something different. And I was just putting in the chat, actually, whilst I was nodding away, was, you know, investing and partnering with Aboriginal community controlled organisations, traditional owner corporations that are multi-million-dollar organisations that represent, you know, a lot of Aboriginal community people across Victoria, and also are the largest employers of Aboriginal people. So that's something that's been a bit of a missing key. And I know from the work in government that there is a big focus on increasing economic participation and building capability and capacity of those organisations, because again, whilst there is opportunities, the demand out there from industry, from community, from government departments on Aboriginal people or Aboriginal employees at the moment is really high. So, you know, we need to make sure that we're building a long and sustainable pipeline or pathways for these people. Yeah, and again, it starts from our early sector, and I know the vet sector have just had a recent overhaul in terms of opportunities. So yeah, I'll just stop there. But again, it's just something to think about, like, where are our traditional owner corporations in this? Where is our ability to invest in them to provide more than just health services? Where are our, you know, supporting, which Kinaway do awesomely, to support our Aboriginal business sector growth? Because that's going to be the point of difference.
Well, you've anticipated kind of the next question, which sort of, I guess, it's a natural conclusion, which is what needs to happen for these opportunities that we've been talking about to become realised. And you've sort of hinted at some of those things. I might just take it back to Del. Delia, what are some of the things that you think need to happen for these opportunities to be realised? Because there's people right now that, as Scott said, they've got the right intention. They might have all the skill set, the knowledge, or the cultural awareness, but the intention is the right intention. It does get a bit daunting when you don't know much about Aboriginal culture, and suddenly there are expectations and people start to realize maybe their institutions are not, or their workplaces maybe aren't at the place they need them to be working smoothly. What are you seeing from your perspective? What are some of the things that need to happen for these opportunities to be realized?
Jimmy, for example, I guess working with more employers that are willing to tailor positions to individuals and their circumstances and help build them up. As we know, a lot of these large corporates are targeting long-term unemployed and those minority cohorts to hit their diversity targets. But as a employment services provider, a lot of our candidates don't tick the box. So what we need to do is be able to take small steps and help build that individual up. If they're not ready for full-time employment, can we take it back to casual, do it 2 days a week, 3 days a week, the following week, until they have, I guess, built that routine and the stamina to be able to retain that full-time role and work with their circumstances. I guess some of these larger businesses, when they're getting into that space of Indigenous employment, it would be great to see someone, an Indigenous person, driving that strategy for them, because one of the things that I guess I'm conscious of a Indigenous person in a mainstream role is that they're being oh my God, I had the word right there and now it's disappeared. But cultural overloading on an Indigenous person in the workplace when they're not in an identified role can put a lot of stress on an employee as well, to be that token person to try and drive the go-to person in the company. And I think, Scott, you mentioned it before that, you've been the only Indigenous man, Aboriginal man working in a business.
Thanks very much, Del. Scott, Del's, put the question to you. You've been the only Aboriginal man in the business. Probably most of us at some point have been maybe the first Aboriginal person in a business. What is it that the businesses can do? What can they do to come to the party here? And what are we needing from the business community to have these opportunities realised?
Yeah, there's a few things that mainstream business can do. And I think I mentioned it before about embedding Aboriginal culture in your organisation. Simple things like acknowledgements of country have a massive difference in changing the culture and mindset of businesses. I was in a meeting with a corporate just recently, and they didn't do an acknowledgement of country, and I asked why. I said, "Oh, we only do it if we have more than 10 people." I'm like, really? That's what a protocol. What sort of protocol is that? But so it's a ticking the box thing. So just starting that with all your meetings, management meetings, staff meetings. I've talked to corporates about just changing meeting room names to be local Aboriginal specific meeting room names. Little things like that, having some artwork around the place, having some opportunities to have elders come in and tell stories, because it's all about education. People are scared of something that they don't know anything about. And that's where all the hatreds come from over the years, is people are scared of something they don't know about. So let's change the narrative and let's actually start educating everyone in an organisation. So you talk about the big corporates. Let's make it a responsibility, those organisations. You know what? We are going to embed Aboriginal culture into the whole organisation. Like on our new building here, for instance, we've actually renovated this whole building in Richmond using Aboriginal businesses to the point where we've actually got carpet with Aboriginal designs on it. And it's a massive conversation starter. When corporates and government come in and say, geez, what's the story behind that? Now, imagine if you just did that in your organisation, if you're a Coles Myer or something, that you had some really significant Indigenous culture embedded into the organisation, the conversation starters. And when people start to learn new things, they ask questions. And I think when you have those real positive conversations in organisations, it makes it a really culturally safe space for people. So that's a little thing that they can do that actually will cost them nothing.
Do you think that's, the things such as, we've all seen businesses that have done acknowledgement of country and then immediately gone back to the same thinking previous. So we know that some of these steps, they're catalyst moments or they're critical moments where we can bring the conversation back to putting First Nations people first in the conversation rather than last.
Yeah.
But what do we do to put more meat on the bones? Organisations are doing their acknowledgements. They get out to those once a year events and support the local Aboriginal businesses. And then we see a return away sometimes to business as usual, which can sometimes be excluding Aboriginal business at its premise. What are some of the ways that we continue to see that same consistency throughout the year? And again, as Del suggested earlier, you know, we do get the cultural overload on the Aboriginal staff member or the Torres Strait staff member that it may not be in their position description to field sensitive questions around culture. They might be the guy in IT, you know, and next minute they're fielding all these personal questions. So what are some of those things that, to realize this change, what are some of the more long-term commitments we could see businesses leaning towards?
Well, again, I think it's education. And we're going through this whole truth-telling thing at the moment. So acknowledging actually what happened in the past. And it doesn't mean it's your fault. It's just acknowledging what's happened in the past and the way forward. Like I remember when I went to school, all I learned about was Captain Cook. I didn't learn about anything before. And then all of a sudden it just created Australia from there. And I think once, and that's the education gap I'm talking about. You know, you're not born racist, you're not born ignorant. It just happens over time by a lack of understanding. So I think businesses just need to have a real good look at themselves and an opportunity, even for a sector, to take leadership in this space, to go, we are going to completely embed Indigenous culture. We are going to do truth telling. We're going to tell the stories of what happened. We're going to tell the amazing Dreamtime stories as well. And get, because you're right. Look, I was in an organisation that had over 1,000 staff, and I was the only Aboriginal person. And then when people found out I was Aboriginal, yeah, it was a lot of cultural overload. People coming to me all the time asking questions, and I see it as my responsibility as well. I did say, this is a safe space. You can ask me any question you want because it's about education. Now, I shared with my team just recently, though, I had someone ask me, is it true that Aboriginal people get a free car and a free house? Like, really? That come from a 30-year-old person?
It's absolutely true. We've all got Ferraris.
Yes. But I guess it's having some champions out in the community that, you know, maybe speak a bit like that. To go, okay, you can ask me absolutely anything, because once you know the truth, and I've said before, the whole truth-telling process is happening at the moment, it just changes people's perspective. They're not scared of it. They want to know more. I haven't had anyone who's asked me an uncomfortable question, what they thought was uncomfortable, who didn't want to know more after that. And I think that's it. It's just and it's an opportunity for an organisation to take the lead, promote. I know Kinaway, if we had an organisation committed to doing that, we would work with them, we would stand with them, walk with them, and promote the hell out of it to show what can happen if you go down the right path. There's an organisation Sarah introduced me to just recently, Dominant Security. An organisation, private company, doesn't get any government contracts, but wanted to know more about Aboriginal culture and made that connection with Sarah, Indigenous Employment Partners. Then rolled out a RAP, didn't need to because he doesn't get government contracts. And it was an amazing event, invited so many community members. He's committed then to providing scholarships for businesses, for individuals, and he's got a plan to employ 20 Aboriginal people in security. Is he getting acknowledgement for it? Is the story being said? No, it's not, because it's not a fancy, lovely news item, but he's actually making a difference, and he's choosing to do what he thinks is the right thing. And what's happened, unfortunately, through the Indigenous procurement policies and the policy that the government put up in regards to Aboriginal employment, it's still just ticking the box exercise. It's still, I've just got to get this percentage. So I better get this RAP, and I better engage Kinaway. I better engage Indigenous Employment Partners, as opposed to making this business as usual.
Yeah, I think the other part to add, of course, is these relationships not only work with the Aboriginal community, but obviously we have a natural effect on the way business is done within a business, and we bring our skill set to that business. Sarah, I wanted to come to you. We're a few minutes away, and we're going to go to grab some questions from our audience in the Q&A in a couple of minutes. And I see some very familiar names in there, people that do some great work in the Aboriginal community. Thanks for joining us. But I want to come back to you, Sarah. What needs to happen for these opportunities to be realised? I'm not sure if yourself or Liz or anyone else might have some of those things that are ruminating in your mind as we heard Scott speak. What do we think needs to happen to really realise the opportunities?
I think to start with, just to continue on with what Scott's saying, is that it doesn't need to be difficult. It doesn't need to be a ginormous commitment. If your commitment is just at this stage, just to employ one other Aboriginal person, or just to change one aspect of your procurement at this stage to be using an Aboriginal service, whether it's buying coffee beans, whether it's changing your print partner, whether it's engaging an Aboriginal business as a consultant services or a cleaning services. Procurement within Aboriginal business does not need to be any more difficult than anything else. You just have to want to do it. And like Scott said, you can have 100 reasons put in front of you of why you can do this, and the government can give you 100 boxes to tick, but you still have to want to do it, and you have to want to reach out, and you're not going to always get it right, and that's okay. You know, like Scott said, we're here to help you. And, you know, I'm assuming most of us on this conversation will have kids or have been engaged with kids. And as I say to my employers, we teach our kids every day what they don't know, and it's okay to ask. But we become adults and we stop asking, and we just assume that we have to know. And then we get uncomfortable when we don't know, and then we don't do it. So what I'm urging, and I urge all my employers to do, is just get uncomfortable and ask the question. Like Scott said, we're okay with you asking the question if it's coming from the right place. We're here to help you. We're here to educate and work together to be able to walk together. So the biggest thing that I guess I can say, if you want change, just pick up the phone and ask. Connect with your traditional owners, connect with your businesses, you know, your peak bodies, your kinaways, your specialists in this area, and say, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. Please, can I have a meeting? It's that simple.
Liz?
I couldn't have said that any better, Sarah. I guess what's missing is there's no guide out there to navigate this space. And if you're unfamiliar with it, you know, like me going to the MCG and trying to find Bay 14, I don't go to football, so I wouldn't know where to find it. Whereas, you know, I'd have to obviously stop and ask somebody. So yeah, there's no, whilst the Aboriginal employment, and there's a lot of programs out there, we uncovered, I think I uncovered over, don't quote me, but 101 different programs that Aboriginal job seekers are participating in, whether it's Commonwealth state funded programs. But there seems to be this disconnect between what those programs are and how employers access them, and how our job seekers know about that in community. So again, it is just asking the question, and you will be pointed in the right area if you've got a point of reference like Jimmy.
So we'll move into, and I appreciate your sentiment of all our panelists, and we want to make sure that we can get our audience involved with our Q&A. So one of the questions for the panelists that we've got from Adam Clark is, what is a good first step for non-Indigenous businesses? So I guess the low-hanging fruit, what's the first step that might be looking to employ an Indigenous person? Where should they start in order to get things right? And I'm going to go, I think, first and foremost to Delia. What are your thoughts? Where's the first step?
My recommendation would be going to, I guess, those Indigenous recruitment specialists, people like myself, Sarah, Scott, well, any one of us, but reaching out to those Indigenous specialists, putting the word out to community first.
First step, Sarah, you know, going to these community workers and leaders such as yourselves that are doing the work in the employment space. Is that the first step? Do you have another first step? I'll take as many steps in the process as possible.
Yeah, look, I 100% agree. It's if your car was broken, well, we probably would Google it actually. Google tells me everything. But you would probably find on Google that your car's dead or dying. But yeah, we would go to who knows how to fix it best, or we would go to a specialist. So get in contact with your specialists in this space. Google them if you want to. Connect with community organisations. Connect with your traditional owners. Go out and meet your traditional owner groups and, you know, take biscuits, they like food, you know, and have a meeting and pick and ask. And like I said, be honest and say, this is what we want to do. We don't know how we do it. You know, the client that Scott just spoke about, he did exactly that. He picked up the phone, he rang us and then sent an email and said, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? So don't be afraid to say, you know, this is your first step. And it's a great step. And we'll be there to hold your hand while you do it.
Scott, you mentioned, you know, one of the big things is the vast majority of people are maybe in the truest sense of the word, ignorant. They've gone through K to 12, maybe K through to university, probably never, they certainly didn't do 15 years of Aboriginal cultural competence or awareness. So they're an adult now, they've gone through university, they're in a position and they don't know what to do. What is the first step, someone? And the reason I raise that is clearly it's the experience of the majority of people that go through the Australian curriculum to not learn a lot about Aboriginal people. And that may be changing, and we see some great opportunities in the near future that we'll see things like the Frontier Wars being taught within school curriculum, massacres, slavery, things that we've had previous prime ministers deny. So there is a little bit of empathy that we understand not everyone's been educated. What is the first step? We've heard, you know, Del and Sarah saying, look, go to the content specialist, you know, come and make a partnership nice and early in the approach. Is there another first step that you would suggest?
Well, they're great first steps. And I think that's, when I sit down and talk to corporates, the approach, and I did this with Dominance, actually, with Nick, is I wanted to know his why he wanted to do it in the first place. Was it to tick a box? Was it what was his reason? And his reason was that he had an Aboriginal friend growing up, didn't realise the hurtful things that he saw, or the things that he saw over time were actually hurtful towards this person. And as an adult, he started asking questions because he felt he could, because he had a really good relationship. So when I understood his why, that's when I was like, yep, I'll help you. I'll help you with your app. And I thought, well, that's the right intention. But I think for an individual person, if you're going through your schooling and I say this to corporates all the time, it's great you've acknowledged country, but what country are you in right now? Find who that is. Contact your local council. Find out who it is. There's lots of stuff on websites. Learn something yourself. And you know, through COVID in particular, I've used this even with my staff, is go and learn something. Go and learn something about the local culture that you live on at the moment, the local traditional owners, some of their stories. And that's the first step, I think, of you know, taking on a new knowledge, because what happens then, as we all know, you can get that Google rabbit hole and off you go. And, you know, 2 days later, you come up for air and you've probably just learned a whole truckload of stuff. There's a lot of information out there that you don't have to be uncomfortable about asking, that you can find some stuff out there. And there will be people that want to help you.
Liz?
I actually was just copying and pasting into the chat the website that you can link to find out whose country you're on. And
that actually leads me to a question we have in our Q&A. You're one step ahead. You're thinking always around the corner. So the question in the Q&A that's come up, is there a central portal / website of some sort that businesses can go to find out the various ATSI supports, organizations, programs, etc.? And that one coming from Melissa. Quickly, the preferred abbreviation for people who aren't familiar is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, not ATSI. You might use some people might use for internal documents ANTSI, which would be an accurate acronym, but generally externally we wouldn't use ATSI. That being said, what are those websites? What is the websites, the portals that people can go and find out about various Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander supports, organisations, programs?
It's probably not as easy as what I would like it to be. So National Indigenous Australian Agency is one of those that is leading the Commonwealth's kind of agenda, and they've recently announced various programs. And as we know, with government changes every 4 years, things change as well, and new acronyms come out. We've also got Victorian State Government, or Aboriginal Affairs Victoria, which is the website that predominantly people would go to get some basic information of who the TOs are, traditional owners, who, you know, protocols around welcome to country, those kind of things. Just noting that Aboriginal Affairs no longer exists. It's called First Nations State Relations now, and it's led by 2 Aboriginal people, which is, again, admirable for Victorian government. So yeah, there's no one-stop shop there. And like I said, there's a whole lot of, I mean, there's registered Aboriginal businesses that Kinaway have, with specialists like Indigenous Employment Partners and others. So again, and most of the job actives will have an Indigenous consultant, in just like us, Jimmy, in 2010. You know, yeah, so most job agencies or programs will have someone that will have a portfolio around this, if that answers the question.
Absolutely. I'm just having a look at some of the other questions we've got. Some are in our Q&A, some are in our chat. I'm just going to check the Q&A for someone I may have missed.
Hey, Jimmy, I can probably pop in a second. I've been sort of monitoring some of the chat functions and so forth. Doing a great job, by the way, and I neglected to do my hostly duties and properly introduce you at the start. Jimmy is the Aboriginal Employment and Projects Officer for the City of Darebin, and has been an absolute gun for us since he came on board more than a year ago. So just monitoring the chat, Jimmy, there's some comments rather than questions from a person who is well known to the panel, Irene Sasdog, who has put in that Aboriginal people want to be trained on the job rather than undertake a traineeship. Providing the right support and understanding comes with the job, and it's a culturally safe environment. I think it picks up on the threads of a point that was made about Aboriginal traineeships and apprenticeships for Aboriginal people earlier on, which you know, seemed to be the go-to for a lot of businesses at one point, as a way of bringing on board Aboriginal people. So thank you, Aunty Irene, for that comment. Did anyone from the panel want to make an additional comment to Aunty Irene? No. Then another.
I will.
Yeah,
hi, Irene. That's great. And whilst this is true that most people prefer hands-on learning, what we're finding, even with industry skills and technical skills, with changes in industry, the demand on I guess skills is not always available in education system. So I think hands-on approach works for everybody.
Thank you. And another point that was made by Terry Wright, who is now with Kmart, I believe. Terry Wright made the point about culturally safe recruitment, and referencing Uncle Johnny Briggs, and talking about how that is very informative about hiring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in a safe and truthful way. Anyone care to comment on that?
Well, yeah, something to add. We're going through a recruitment phase at the moment where we're recruiting 12 people, and we've done it a little bit differently in terms of doing the long, boring job applications and addressing selection criteria. We've made it optional. You can submit a video application that you can just get on, have a bit of a yarn on a video and send it through to us. And you know, we've had some quite good ones. People that they want to sit there behind a computer, because some of the positions are about being innovative. And some people don't feel comfortable writing selection criteria. They'd rather talk about it. And we find that, yeah, just a different approach. It gets a different type of person that applies to the roles that maybe they wouldn't normally apply for.
Thanks, Scott. That actually reminds me of a conversation you and I and Dennis Batty, who's Sarah's business partner, were having not long ago about how you're flipping the kind of the recruitment process on its head when it comes to businesses engaging with Aboriginal people. One of you want to talk to that? Maybe Sarah, do you want to sort of pick up on that thread?
Yeah, sure. So IEP, I've been in recruitment for a long time, and I think the way that Kinaway have gone about their positions is great. And we talk to employers on a regular basis about shaking up the way that they do recruitment and stepping outside of the box of the standard recruitment. So we decided to do that in our own way as well, where we now invite once a month community into our SAFE organisation at the Kinaway hub there. And what we do is make employers pitch to community their opportunities. As Liz has said, that the unemployment level for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is still growing, and that gap is not closing. Yet we know that the increase of corporates and mainstream organisations wanting to employ Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is increasing. So what we have decided to do is, with the organisations like Scott spoke about, that we class as culturally safe, that we've generally gone through our processes with them in doing cultural audits and making sure that they're culturally appropriate and culturally ready to employ Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We then get them to pitch about their organisation. And we explain to the employers that the reason that we do this is that we can talk 100 times about how great their organisation is and what opportunities there are and why people work for them. But we all know that when we work in an organisation and why we work for that organisation and why we sell that so much better ourselves rather than somebody selling it for us. And that what it also does is give community an opportunity to be in the driver's seat and ask questions about why that organisation is doing what they're doing. And like Scott said, asking, well, why is this important to you? Why do you want our people to work in your organisation, and what does that look like? And then they basically go on a little speed date. So our mentors then come in once the employers have pitched, and they talk to the participants in the room, and they talk about, what was of interest. And it might not just be interest for them there that day, but they may go home and do what we know works so best, being the grapevine, and talk to Auntie or their sister or Joe down the street. But what they then get to do is basically go and have a conversation with that particular employer and have that first initial meeting with them, which is face-to-face. It's not in a big boardroom. It's not with people sitting on either side of a table. It's an informal yarn about their opportunities. And we're seeing some great results for both employers but also for community. It was meant to be tomorrow, but unfortunately it's been postponed at this stage.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I am mindful that we're only a couple of minutes. We've sort of come close to the end of time, but seeing so we do have another question in the Q&A, I'm going to be put us on blackfella time, and we're going to have just a little bit of a yarn, just a little bit of flexibility on this one, because I think it's an important question, and we've got all the mob here, so it's important that everyone gets an opportunity just to feel this one. So this is coming in from Mike Lewis from Kinetic. Michael, my organisation has around 30 sites throughout Australia, particularly in regional areas. Beyond employment strategies, we're currently undertaking what we want to engage with local communities as part of our RAP, and also from a genuine commitment to do things better to support communities. Finding that starting point is not always easy, particularly in an area like Cairns and some contested areas. What's the best way into building a genuine and sustainable relationship? I'm just going to quickly comment on this one. Words and actions need to be the same thing. That's my takeaway as a host. I shouldn't be giving my opinion, but that is the one thing I've learned over these years is when your words and your actions are consistent, you build trust. And I believe that's the foundation of building strong relationships. I'm going to go to Liz. If you can tell us, Liz, what do you think? How do we build those strong relationships? We've got our perspectives. Others are finding it difficult when meeting the Aboriginal community to make that relationship.
think there's a couple of things in this, and I know we're time poor, and I'm happy to obviously chat further to anyone that might need some extra help. In terms of congested areas, it's not really difficult either. You know, we look for building those relationships with those traditional owners, yes, and there are a number of traditional owners and corporations that are not necessarily recognised, so we can't exclude them either. So it is a bit difficult to navigate, but what I'm saying is put your mind at ease and ask the questions and refer to, like, I guess, government platforms to get the best advice, because I know that those platforms are out there in terms of who to go to when you're trying to build those relationships. If it's around Aboriginal participation targets or social or legal licenses around native title and those kind of things, again, that there are platforms out there that help support those kind of community engagements. But again, I just give the confidence to the person, the intention's right, you're really wanting to do it, and just find the right thing. Don't think that you're going to make a mistake or a political, you know, upheaval between different mobs, because that's not what I see as a challenge either. Sorry, it's a bit of a roundabout, but I wanted to make sure that there's no fear in asking or engaging, or not engaging. Not engaging is the worst thing, than probably not thinking that you're engaging with the right person.
So, and I'll go just to the last one, just from another perspective. Thanks, Liz, for that one. And I'm just going to finish with Scott today. Scott, if you can give us you know, what are those, under a short answer, if possible, around what are those things that are needed to make the relationship a genuine, sincere relationship? Mike's up in Kuku-Yalanji country up there in Cairns, lots of different traditional owner groups in close proximity to one another. Liz has mentioned, don't let that be a barrier, start the conversation, learn more. But broadly speaking, what is it that we're looking for? How can we articulate to non-Indigenous how to start a relationship?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to trust is a big thing. So making it really clear what your intentions are and your why you want to do it. I think once you do that, you'll actually pull people out of the community that want to come and engage with you anyway, if they believe it, if it's real. Look, it can be quite political out there. We experience some of it in Melbourne with some of the stuff that's happening in the eastern suburbs at the moment with 2 different or 3 different traditional owner groups. And it's a political nightmare, but don't let that be the disabler. Just make sure everyone understands your story. Your why is the most important thing, and you know, it will happen. People will reach out and just engage with everybody. That's as simple as thing. Just don't choose one over the other. Just engage with everyone. You know, I think that's again, it's just people going with the right intentions, but just don't know how to do it. And my advice is just be real in what you're doing. Absolutely real.
Well, I'd like to thank all our panelists, Scott McCartney, CEO of Kinaway Aboriginal Chamber of Commerce and proud Wadjabalik warrior, as well as Sarah Stewart, Gamilaroi woman from the co-director at Indigenous Employment Partners, Dalia Parker, sorry, lost my comms there, Bunjama woman from Indigenous Program Manager at Job Find Centres Australia, and Liz Allen, Wurundjeri and Dja Dja Wurrung woman, currently one of 20 of the Aboriginal advisors on the Victorian Aboriginal Economic and Employment Committee, supporting the Victorian Government's new Aboriginal Economic Strategy for 2021. So we're going to head back over to Phil O'Brien, who's going to lead us into our next session. Thank you all our panelists. It's lovely to see you all. And thanks for everyone who jumped in the Q&A. Make sure you do in our next session.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much, Jimmy. And thank you all of our panel members who have been acknowledged there. That was pretty amazing. During the time that we've been organising all of this and catching up with these people, it's just been such a great learning experience for me and for our organisation to be engaging with such a great group of people. So what's going to happen now is we're going to have a short break. So time to enjoy some sunshine. The sun's out where I am, up in Wurundjeri country in Eltham. Hope it is for you. We're going to have like a 15-minute break. So we'll come back at about 2:40 and we'll launch straight into our next panel, which will include some amazing leaders from the multicultural and newly arrived communities. Whilst we're on the break, there'll be some slides that'll be presented with some information includes some stuff about incentives, financial incentives for employment, as well as where you can promote some opportunities. For you also to put stuff into the chat room about how people can you and your organisation. And please get those questions into the Q&A rather than the chat function. There will be more opportunities. So if there was a question that you had for our previous panel that you still want to put in, there'll be some opportunity right at the end when we'll have some general conversation and discussion. So thanks again. Have a short break and we'll see you back at 2:40. Thank you. And welcome back, everybody. Just while we're just getting ourselves settled, just to quickly acknowledge the help of my colleagues in the background also that are fiddling with the buttons and dials. It's been really helpful, particularly given the technical glitches we had earlier this afternoon. My colleague Jimmy just reminded me of something that we have been hosting and chairing a little group for a while now. It's a group of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander employment professionals that includes people like Scott, Sarah's partner, Dennis, and Dalia. And if there are people here today that would like to participate in that, the purpose of that network group is to discuss specifically Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander employment with I guess a Darebin or a Northern region context. If you would like to be involved, please reach out. Let me know. There's some contact details that are being posted into the slideshow that was just presented before, and there'll be some more coming up later. And additionally, if there are any questions that come from that slideshow we just presented about how you might be able to engage with some of that stuff, again, please get in touch with me and with us. So let's not keep them waiting any longer. We have our next panel who will be talking about the challenges and opportunities for the multicultural and diverse and newly arrived groups in relation to employment. And to get things underway, I will hand over to my colleague, Mr. Shabazz Fatah, who is the Multicultural and Diversity Project Officer with the City of Darebin. Thank you, Shabazz.
Thank you, Philippe. Hi, everyone. Well, firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the land on which I am joining you all from, Wurundjeri Wurrung people. I recognize their continuing connection to land, water, and culture. I would like also to acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending today's forum, and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Well, as Philippe mentioned, this part of the forum is focusing on employment challenge and opportunities for people from culturally and linguistically diverse background, including the newly arrived migrant and refugees, which yeah, when we talk about the CALT community, we are talking about a very broad, big cohort of people, and which include lots of many different groups with different challenge experience. And maybe a newly arrived migrant and refugees is one of the let's say most disadvantaged group within CALT community in terms of accessing employment opportunities. We are joined by an amazing group of panelists, and I'm really personally, and I'm sure you all are looking forward to hear from them. Abdi Aziz Farah is one of the panel members, a manager of Himalaya Community Connect, a community inclusion and support program. He has an extensive experience in the community and government sector and lectures at RMIT Social Work Master Program, and currently serve on the state government's culturally and linguistically diverse communities health advisory panel. Abdi Aziz organization has assisted, in the last 2 years, has assisted over 115 people, and is delivered in partnership with government, community, and other business sectors. Assisted people, of course, with employment opportunities and accessing employment opportunities. The second panel member is Maha Mohammed. Maha is currently managing the Job Victoria Employment Program with Victorian Cooperative on Children's Service for Ethnic Groups, VICSEC. New Future training. She has been working in employment sector for 15 years with non-profit organization. In her current role, Maha oversees the delivery of the Job Victoria program, as well as securing suitable opportunities for participants. Another panel members, Muhammad Yassin. Muhammad Yassin is currently the Community Representative Commissioner on the Victorian Multicultural Commission and a board member of the Ethnic Communities Council of Victoria. He's a former refugee arriving in Australia in 2003. He's the project lead for the strategic partnership and community engagement with Spectrum Migrant Resource Centre, and the founder and CEO of the Culture and CO, which is a cultural training and consulting organization that's working with government and non-profit sector to create programs that meet the need of people from refugee and migrant background. The fourth panel member, Prasant Modi, has been working with AIMS Australia as a work broker since August 2017. He's currently working as a senior employment officer for refugee training and employment program. So welcome all. Very, very interesting and exciting kind of backgrounds, experience that I'm sure they will be able to answer well some of the questions that we have today, and you might have as well, around employment opportunities for multicultural or cult communities. So I would like to start with the same question, the same as the previous panel, in terms of opportunities, challenges, and also what should happen to make existing opportunities to be realized and to be mobilized in a proper way. So let's start with the challenge experienced by multicultural and it's been experienced by multicultural communities in terms of access to employment opportunity and in relation to employment. I would like to start with Muhammad. Muhammad, you are working with the Victorian Multicultural Commission and with the ECCV, Ethnic Community Council of Victoria. Maybe you can give us some general picture about like what's happening in terms of the challenge being faced by multicultural community in relation to employment.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. I also want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm calling you from today, the Wurundjeri clan. And I also acknowledge any traditional owners that are with us today, Aunty Julie and the other panelists and other people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders that are with us today. I also want to mention that as a refugee to this country, as a son of a boat person, I'm a beneficiary of the system of injustice that many Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people have been subjected to over the years, and really truly believe that we will not get many of the topics and the issues that we're trying to work on with the multicultural communities until we get it right with the First Nations people in this country. So I'm very, very pleased to be here with you, and yeah, difficult topic, of course, around employment. One of the, I would say, biggest challenges that I think we face and the communities face is employment, and how crucial employment is in the settlement journey of many communities and the well-being of the communities, but also the well-being of our society, and how integrated we are and how we work together to create a society that is working for everyone in it, and removing all barriers and creating a more equitable outcome for all. So I'll start with really kind of these damning kind of stats around people arriving in Australia, especially as refugees. I came here as a refugee, and really kind of some stats show that after 1 year, 77% of the people still looking for jobs after 3 years is about 38%, and after 10 years, it's still about 22% of people still unemployed after arriving into Australia. And really that puts in picture the kind of challenge that we're facing, especially like now, if you look at the recent years, unemployment for the general public has been around the 6%, 7%, now it's even 5%. Really kind of working in the space, and part of the work that I'm doing with the organizations, but also some of the social enterprises I run in the past in the employment space, especially working in the west of Melbourne, Footscray, with different job actives and JVN providers and community organizations. English and the importance of learning English for CALD communities is key, especially for recently arrived refugees. The other one is about, and some of these you all know about, so I'm going to dig deep into some of the ones that I see the nuances with. Local experience for many CALD communities is missing. Even people that come here with tons of experience from overseas come here and see this barrier of finding basically employers that will accept them for who they are and for the background experience that they bring to this country without any local experience. And sometimes that leads to other issues like people being disappointed, people being discouraged, and people suffer from mental health as a result of all of the wealth of knowledge and skills that they've created over the years not being recognized here, and they really have to start from zero. A big one is around understanding the system. Many people that come here find themselves living and accessing a maze of opportunities, a maze of services, and a maze of service providers. And for you to move into another country, especially if language is a challenge, and then try to understand all of these programs and all of these service providers, that has a mental load on someone, especially the first few years of their life, while they probably have been escaping from trauma, from war, and trying to establish their new life, while they're having a challenge with cultural shock, while they're having a challenge trying to establish their social connection as well. And yet when they think about employment, I mean, I'm in this space, I'm still trying to keep up with all of the programs that exist in the space for the JVs and the job advocates and the community connectors and the Parents Next and another 1,000 programs and acronyms that we throw in there as support, but really someone who's just arrived into this country needs to kind of manage and navigate through all of that. If I go into a little bit deep, I'm part of a settlement service provider, for example, Spectrum, and I've worked with many others, worked with the service providers in the employment space, and really, to be honest, many great people work in these spaces, but really we are part of the problem because eventually we're working within a system and a model of service delivery that may need to change for us to have better outcome for migrant refugees, a system that is based on a welfare model, on a deficit-based model, and on looking at employment as looking at employment in isolation rather than within the context of someone's journey and someone's settlement, really not paying too much attention to the mental health, to the social connection, to the support that someone needs to have while they're trying to find a job and progress in their career in Australia. And the other thing that I'll mention, and you can stop me or not me when I'm going too far, is really around working with this basically ecosystem of employers who need to also have some level of understanding of the migrant refugee journey, of cultural awareness, and we covered this in the previous panel. Really employers that need to have a little bit more understanding of the nuances of cultural understanding and really creating cultural safe spaces and really be welcoming and be willing to engage people from CALD background into their spaces. And I'm going to talk about the opportunities probably later, but really kind of seeing the benefit of employing and engaging with CALD communities in general.
Thank you, Mohammed. The same question to Maha. What are the challenges? I'm sure you've been working for VICSEC for a long time and working with the CALD communities and with the specific cohorts within CALD communities. What are some of these challenges that you found in your day-to-day work with this different cohort of people?
Sure. So thank you very much for having me first. And it was great to listen to the panel previously, which they covered a lot of those areas because they are applied to us as well, or to the cohort we're working with. Majority of the barriers are always mentioned a lot. So you get the English, you know, the settling in the country, you know, the journey and how we can help them. However, we always stop in one of those stations and we never continue forward, you know, and it's because, as Mohammed said, there's overwhelming, you know, services that they're to help, you know, with all goodwill. However, it's very confusing, very challenging for someone who does not understand to have, you know, 3-4 appointments in the same week, you know, while they don't have the level of language or the understanding of the Australian system. So that has been a major area. Now, through my work in FICSIC, we have a higher rate of women participants, and for them there is a major obstacle as well, and that's, you know, that they have family responsibilities. So the caring responsibilities becomes a major barrier. You know, we all want to have kids, we all want to, you know, have families, you know, and build, you know, the new future, the new generation. However, that becomes an obstacle in terms of employment because they can't work to 5, they can't meet the requirements, you know, so employers lack the understanding of that, you know, that need, you know. So it's about, you know, for example, introducing a shared job, if you like, you know, a mentor system, but we'll talk about opportunities later. So having said that, there is a lot of barriers that, you know, stop them. So Mohammed said they come from trauma, they have traumas, they have, you know, gone through a lot of mental illness experiences that they still with them, they still need to work through. So it's about us coming together into finding where is that train going. You know, how can we, you know, continue the service and supporting them? So this is where, you know, all of these services, like right now I'm managing the JVS program, which is a new initiative. It's a very great program, and I've been, you know, working on this for the past 2 years. However, you know, we and Job Active are going to call the clients to 3-4 appointments. At the end, they will give up and they will just say, you know, they will become very demotivated, if you like. They will become very, you know, they lack the confidence because they're repeating themselves, you know, a lot without having to go forward. So that's one of the obstacles that they have. The other thing is lack of support. So we keep referring them to service, but we don't continue supporting them to the second level. That would be one of them. The language as well, and not only that, not assessing them correctly in the first place. Not asking them correctly. So in the first conversation that we have with them, we do not, you know, acknowledge those barriers. We don't identify the need, you know, so they get shifted to services that sometimes they might not need, you know, they should not be there, you know. So you have someone with, for example, a newly arrived with disability, but that disability hasn't been identified. So they're not suitable to go to a certain services, you know. So a lot of, you know, services as well as employers require education around, you know, the assessment and the matching of their jobs to those clients. I hope that would answer the question.
Thank you. No, thank you, Mahab. Actually, you mentioned some issues around, as I mentioned, when we talk about CALD community, we are talking about a very broad community, and there are lots of intersectionality. Yeah. Like what you mentioned about women, specific challenge faced by women, specific challenge faced by disability. This is a very interesting part. So we might later, we will have an opportunity to get back to speak more about certain cohort and group within CALD community, women, young people, disabled, LGBTIQ people that I'm sure they face more challenge and additional challenge in this regard. But I would like to go to Abdi Aziz and asking the same question, especially Abdi, you've been involved in assisting many people in the last 2 years to get access to employment opportunities. So what's your kind of insight, and what are the main challenges that you've been realizing in the last 2 years when helping all these people?
Thank you very much, Shabazz, my colleagues, co-presenters. Thank you very much. I'd also like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we meet today and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and those who might be here with us. I also want to thank the previous panel for sharing their expertise and experience. And there's a lot of similarities with the cold community and refugees. Some of the challenges that we do face, they have been facing for many years. I'll also like to acknowledge my colleague, Nicole, who is Himilo's employment advocate, who is also online, and her details are on the chat room. I think in terms of the broader challenges, and I agree with Maha and Mohammed in terms of the challenges that comes with coming into a new country. And for many of us, I do a lot of consulting for new workers, cultural consulting, but I also work with students who are going to work with a specific cohort of communities. And often they come and they want to know about the journey, the background of the people that they're going to work. They ask about what they should be looking at, what they should be careful of. Basically, we prepare mainstream workers to work with the cold communities, but when the roles are reversed and cold communities are going for a job, there's an expectation that they will be culturally aware and that they will hit the ground running. So there's disparities in terms of the preparations. And there's well-established research on names of ethnics. Australian National University research indicates people who have got different sounding names are quite disadvantaged in the market, in the employment market. And speaking to young people, regular basis who are struggling with employment. I was speaking to a group of young Somali Australians, and one of the young people said, I constantly struggled with getting interviews because of my name. And he said, I've changed my name. I thought he shortened, as many cold and refugee communities do. And I asked him eagerly, what did you do? He said, I changed my name to my coffee name, which is Chris. Often, when you order a coffee and you say Abdulaziz, they say, how do you spell it? It's just a long name. And he said, for coffee, I just say, my name is Chris. And it's very easy for them. Hey, Chris, your coffee is here. And he thought, why don't I use my coffee name on my resumes? And he said, that's how I got the job, which was quite disappointing, to be honest, for a person to, exclude their a significant part of their identity to do that. So for me, the challenges are two. One is within the communities, and that is, lack of role models. We're often dealing with the first generation of migrants and refugees, so there's no a framework for them in the employment context within the community. So they don't have an uncle who works at Darebin Council that they can say, I have a work experience in there, or they are not connected in a way. They don't have people who are running businesses that they can be employed within that business. So they're basically starting from ground zero. But the more important thing is the systemic barriers, racism, discrimination, and intersectionality, Shabazz, that you have referred into there. Being a refugee woman is a challenge enough. Then being a Black refugee woman is even more. So a Black refugee Muslim woman who wears hijab, it's even more. So there's a lot of intersectionalities when we talk about systemic racism on the system. I will just refer to the cohorts that I'm working with, which are the Somali Australian community in West Heidelberg. Again, speaking about the systemic racism that they face. Youth unemployment, some Australian youth unemployment in West Heidelberg stands at 38%. So that's 38% youth unemployment in within our community. We have commissioned research with La Trobe University, which has established that Somali Australian person who went to primary, secondary, and university in Australia, we're not talking about people whose overseas qualifications are not recognized, people who came here as adults. We're talking about young people who are either born here or came here very young and had their complete education from primary to university, have got the same employment prospect of someone from the broader community who have left school in year 10. That's quite shocking. The community's uptake of university is higher. So there are more Somali Australians going to universities than the broader community. But when they graduate, their unemployment rate is 3.5 times higher than their colleagues that they graduated from the same courses, same universities. So these are the challenges that are facing the communities that I work in, and it's a combination of both systemic and internal within that lack of network, role models, and pre-existing establishment within the community in terms of having their own jobs. And finally, what I want to say is employment is the only thing that the community doesn't have a control over. We can't employ our own people. We know that they're unemployed, but we don't have the business. We don't have either power or influence. So being asked to advocate and act for a community that is starting from zero is a big challenge. But there are a lot of opportunities, and we will discuss that when we get into the second phase. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of really important, I have to say, important insights, Abdi. Thank you for sharing all these thoughts. I'm going to present with the same question, especially working with aims that we all know, working in employment sector, especially with a focus on migrant and refugee communities. What are some of the challenges, in addition to what have been mentioned already, that you think are, they are challenges facing multicultural communities, especially migrant ones?
Sure. Thank you, Shabazz, for giving me this opportunity. I'm very grateful to be here, to be able to share my knowledge and experience working with refugee background people. I'm also very happy to gain the valuable knowledge, just what everyone has shared the previous panel. It's really nice to gain knowledge and see where we are heading to. So good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I agree with Maha, Mohammed, and Abdiaziz on the challenges that we are facing with refugee clients and multicultural communities. I also experienced the same challenges. English language is a very big barrier. Apart from that, there is mental health issues that people are facing due to the trauma they have undergone in the countries they come from. Apart from that, I have experienced that lack of knowledge using technology, internet, for example, looking and applying for jobs online, accessing MyGov and other government platforms. So that's a big barrier we have to try to overcome to help people get into employment and reach their goals. Apart from that, as Maha mentioned, cultural barriers. Lots of people back in from where they come from, they have the thinking that women are just there to look after children. That's the only responsibility they have. So that is different back here in Australia. So it's certainly it is not easy when you come to a new country and adapt and learn things and the culture that the country is following. So that's why a lot of education requires. Refugees bring a lot of skill set and experience back from where they come from, but it's just a matter of helping them and you know, gain and get the value of the skills they have and transition them to the new community they are in. So that's the main thing. The other barriers I have experienced is the lack of labor market knowledge. So they don't really know where to start from, what are the jobs they can get to start with, and how to transfer the skills they have already and gain other skills that can take them to another level. So that is also a very important barrier, and that's where we need to educate them and help them and see what is their passion, what are they looking for, and what do they see a career in, and as per that provide them career counseling, help them with the basic vocational barriers, help them reskill and upskill, and that's the way to get them to reach their goals and put them into sustainable employment. And
thank you. Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so I was just saying, so that's the way, you know, because once employment is a very important factor. Once you are in employment, you feel a lot security, and you can think further on your goals and how you can accomplish them. So that's a very important factor.
Thank you, President. Yeah, I fully agree with you, totally agree with you. Well, for the sake of time, I still have 2 questions left, and I really would like each one of you to answer each one of these questions, but I will combine both, which is about opportunities available to multicultural communities in terms of accessing employment opportunities, and what would need to be done for these opportunities to be realized or to be accessed to, actually, because sometimes there are opportunities realized, but there's a kind of accessing kind of problem. So again, I'll start with you, Mohammed. What do you think about opportunities and what can be done in terms of realizing and accessing these opportunities?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll put a timer so that I don't go over time.
No worries.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, really many migrant refugees, at least the ones that I've been interacting with, come here with a passion and a spirit to succeed and to do well. And they come from tough backgrounds, but they really want to come here and succeed for themselves and their families and their children, and their parents, and make them proud. So I think the opportunity is really to kind of capture that and utilize that to help them see the opportunities and help them navigate through the system in a better way. The other thing that is connected to that is that entrepreneurial spirit. Many refugees have been through tough times. Many migrants come here and see tons of opportunities if they're given few skills that allows them to really kind of take that passion and convert it into something that they could utilize. For example, you give a refugee or a migrant a job, well, you have one person less to worry about. But really, if you allow them to create a business, well, the reality is you have them and probably 5, 10, maybe 100 people from that community and the social and the society really able to kind of get into employment through that business as well. The other thing I would say is the opportunity exists within employing someone from a diverse background is also something that the business, the organization can benefit from. Many refugees and migrants come here with great intercultural communication skills. They come here with a global perspective. They come here with different ideas they've tried, they've seen, and they come here with lived experience, something that you need to apply on your day-to-day when you're dealing with a diverse community, diverse clients, diverse customers in your organization. And the last thing I would say in the opportunity is really about creating entry-level jobs for certain cohorts of people that are finding it tougher and tougher to enter the system of employment. Many decades ago, it used to be that you jump out of a ship here and you could choose where you want to work, and the next day you're in a factory, even without the English, doing the work, and then you start building and start understanding the system from within. Nowadays, especially with the rise and the function of the big barrier that I see, which is the recruitment companies and labor hire companies at the front, and they're dealing with tons of people. Any person who does not meet those criteria, especially English and local experience, will not go through, which means that you don't have access to the market to start with. Few years ago, we employed someone through my social enterprise in Colac in Victoria. just to work with council and cleaning basically facilities and toilets. Few months later, that woman, through accessing the system, through accessing the opportunity and interacting with people, showcased some of her other interests, which is catering and creating business. And then she gave up that job and created a catering company and started having contracts with the council. That's what you need. You need people to be introduced to the system. Really, what do we need to do? The second part of the question, to me, the biggest investment we need to put is targeting employers and changing the system. That's where, if you have more jobs available, it's much easier for us to take people through that journey with jobs available at the end of the day than what currently happens. And a lot of the times you take people through a journey of re-education and retraining for them finally to find that they don't have access to jobs, which means you've lost all of those kind of resources, you've wasted the resources, but also you've introduced someone to become more dependent on welfare, but also more disappointed and more disengaged with the system. For me, early engagement is key, and really getting people to see the opportunities that exist here. I believe that the current model that we have around job employment services and even settlement really leads to some sort of a dependency on the model, because we're creating it through a deficit-based and an old social welfare model. And really, if we move to a strength-based model, we could allow people to see and build hope and see the opportunities, which will allow them to kind of find it easier to get jobs and progress in this country. The second thing is, especially for those who are working in this space as an employment service providers, looking at this issue in a holistic manner. And sometimes it's about building capacity within your organization as a service provider in employment, or partnering up with other service providers in that space, allowing you to provide that holistic approach. And the last thing I would say is, for employers, really kind of, especially about social procurement, engage cold service providers early on when you have, let's say, a project coming up in a year. What I found is a lot of the times we have employers that need to fulfill their social procurement, but they come to the service providers and the recruitment companies and to communities very late and say, we need 10 engineers with that much level of qualification and training. And if they had given us like a year, we could have got them the 20 engineers, but they come very late. So the advice here, come early, co-design your projects with communities and community organizations and cult service providers, and then you have better outcomes at the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Before going to Maha, same question, by the way. As a multicultural and diversity officer and advocates for a multicultural community, I would like to get more time for this because our time will finish at 3:20. So I hope, there are some flexibilities about the time thing. Maha, please, same question.
No worries, thank you.
Opportunities, how these opportunities can be realized.
Thank you, Mohammed. I must say, you need to stop stealing my keys, but yeah. Opportunities, I guess what we're not realizing is that for someone to go through the trauma, the moving to a new culture, changing, and starting, I mean, you're losing your memories, your friendship, your life, your roots, and you're starting from scratch. If you were not motivated, if you were not, resilient, if you haven't built those skills that employers are looking for, they will not be here, So employers need to understand those qualities in when they recruit. These guys are motivated to start a new life, to provide to their families, to build a future and be part of the society. We're merely a way of helping them, where we're just tools here to support them. So it's about employers having that education. We try in my organization is, as Mohammed says, have those partnerships, so we bypass some of the recruitment and go to the employers and try to build that human contact relationship, about how to work with those individuals and help them through it. I'll give you an example. A lady was placed into an aged care center, you know, where they need to wear uniform. Now she wears a scarf and she can't take it, of course. So the negotiation about, you know, the discussion about, you know, the culture awareness was great, you know, and the employer was open to hear from the client and listen to their, you know, beliefs and what they need. And eventually it resulted into she would coordinate the colors of her outfit to match the uniform. You know, so that was one outcome. The other outcome is that, you know, all of the Italian, you know, if you like, women in the age center, they value the cultures, because, you know, they looked at them as nuns, and they used to call them sisters. So they used to call her as sister, and sister in Arabic or African culture is basically, you know, a respect, you know, to someone who is servicing you. So there was, you know, a matching there of, you know, beliefs. So people say racism as well. Racism, you know, it's overrated, I feel. You know, yes, sometimes it's genuinely happening and it's really, you know, but employers are afraid of asking questions. Employers are afraid of, you know, communicating with us and knowing what, you know, our cultures is, because they are afraid of offending us. And I used to tell my colleagues in the office that, you know, I can say this, you cannot say it, you know, because if you have an issue with the client, please tell me and I will address it, simply because that might create a conflict, you know. Either the client will not understand them, or they will, you know, lead the conversation, I guess, if you like. So it's about you know, looking into the opportunities of you know, how can we support them by providing mentors, by providing, you know, education, by having, you know, introducing them to the hidden market. You know, a lot of people don't know how to actually, you know, tap into the hidden market. You know, we think you have to go through, yes, we have to do interviews, we have to meet compliance, we have to complete all of that. But the major important part is, you know, networking. A lot of the jobs is through networking, and that's simply exactly like back home. You know, your cousin, your uncle, your auntie, they will all connect and they will, you know, refer you to someone, and then you'll go through the interview process. So it's about, you know, educating the two parties to understand, you know, the need of both of them. I would say ask questions, reach out, engage, communicate. You know, there is nothing called, you know, forbidden or, you know, don't do this and don't do that. People are open, and with now employers being, you know, Melbourne is multicultural city, so there's employees from all walks of life, so we can connect the clients that we have multi-languages, so they can speak 2, 3, 4 languages at a time, and they will be very valuable members of the you know, the force, because they will be able to speak to different type of cohort, and, you know, they will be able to bring you more business, you know, by just networking and communicating, either through their communities, friends, or even just being, you know, out there communicating different languages. You know, if I wasn't able to speak 3 languages, I would not be in Fixit right now. Not that, you know, my skills doesn't matter, but it does. But I bring that, you know, wealth of culture to them as well. So it's about an employer understanding what the clients bring to them, you know, because it's not only just one staff member, it's a business that brought.
Thank you, Mahab. But yes, I fully agree with you. Lots of complications have to be dealt with from both sides. How we are going to deal with all of these complications is, yeah, it's a big question.
One at a time, one at a time. We will get there.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Abdi, the same question for you. Like, you work with an organization, like helped over 100 people with the accessing employment and accessing job opportunities. I'm sure there are some opportunities you realize to be able to help these people. So what are some of these opportunities that you can share with us and how they can be realized?
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I'm conscious of the time. I think, you know, one of the biggest mistakes that we do when we are talking about employment and cold communities, the deficit thinking. You know, we think what the other communities are missing rather than what they bring to the organization. You know, people bring lived experiences, they bring cultural diversity, they bring a wealth of knowledge, whether that's for a business or a government sector. So I think a starting point would be having a systemic approach to engaging with people. And I work with government departments to create employment pathways or opportunities for our community members. And one example I can share is the great work that we've done with the Department of Health and Human Services in creating employment pathways for young Australians who are living in public housing, but working in the public housing department. And the feedback that we get is that they enrich not just the front of house in terms of reception, but they also enrich the knowledge and cultural competence of their colleagues that they're working with. So it just was a great investment for the department, but that was only enabled by the senior leadership saying, we do recognize the importance of economic participation for your community members, and we are committed to workplace diversity, and we will bring members of the community and these cohorts into the department. A great successful partnership. The other systemic approach example that I can briefly give is the city of Banyu, where they have created and paid internship for people with disabilities, refugees, and Indigenous Australians, where people are given. And our experience is that all they need is just that first step into the door. In my own work here, in the last 4 years that I was running the Himilo program, there were 9 staff members who used this project and my work as stepping stone. So people who are long-term unemployed, and then they come, they are with us for 12 months, create the links, the confidences, and move into a better paying and long-term and more secure employment. We can have the goodwill, but unless there's a systemic approach at the business level, or in the case of the council, for example, Darebin, or any other government, state or federal, is to say we do recognize that these communities do face additional barriers, and therefore we are going to have a system in place. And it works very well. If you look at the integration of Somali Australians in America and those in Melbourne, through the research done by Dr. Omar in his PhD, was that in America they were very, very successful in terms of their resettlements and economic participation, because in America they have got the Black civil rights movements that the Somalis, when they got there, they built on. Whereas in Australia, we see how we treat our Indigenous people, and there was no things to do. The second quickly thing that I'm going to mention is partnerships. So we need to be in partnership with communities. We can't do things for communities, we have to do with them. And thirdly, we have to give opportunities and promote businesses that are run by the communities. Maha would know, a few years back, a lot of African communities opened family day care business sectors. And even just in the area of Heidelberg, there were over 2,000 women who were employed in that sector, jobs that were created by the community for the community. You can't beat that. So doing businesses with the community in the right way is also a way that we can empower the community and move from the welfare model of saying, oh, let us help these poor guys, to saying, look, they actually bring something to the table. Let us work with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdi. Thank you very much. I just directly go to Prasad, and you will be my hero and this forum hero if you can answer this question in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, Shahbaz, I'll try my best. I'll try to be brief and just highlight some key points through my experience. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities out there for multicultural and refugee background clients. But the main thing is to be able to know what they're exactly looking for, what's their passion, what they want to be working as. It's no point of putting a client in a job where we know that he's not going to last. So it's all about thinking and figuring out what they want to do, what skills they have, and then being able to refer them to suitable programs or platforms where they can use those skills as an entry level and move ahead from there. So there's different programs, for example, EPIC program, which is a really good program for engineering background people. So the program connects with major employers in the industry like John Holland, metro trains, level crossing removal projects. So they provide paid cadetships, and this way people are getting exposure to the local labor market, getting more local experience, and then thereby they can go ahead in their career and fulfill their aspirations. So it's all about knowing what they want and acting upon that and referring them to suitable programs and platforms. The other thing I think is there's lots of opportunities even as self-employment, because I've come across people who have been doing a lot of self-employment work, for example, like trades work, painters, renderers, roof tilers. So construction industry is right now at a boom, and people, they are looking for trades people. So that's how we can assist these people. So self-employment is also a really good option, and it's all about just helping them get their get them some formal qualifications and training, and there you go, you can help them open their own businesses. So another thing is to collaborate and find employers who are willing to give call communities a fair go, and that way they can showcase their skills and experience, and employers are also getting the enhanced services that they can offer. So it is a win-win for both the people as well as employers, because they are getting good experience, knowledge, and people are building their careers and moving ahead. So it's all matter of connections, networking, providing good platforms, and helping out and supporting people during the entire phase. It's not like you've got a job for a client and then you leave it from there. It is all about providing the individual support and guidance throughout their journey, so they reach where they want to. That's what I would say.
Thank you, President. I'm
My
just
pleasure.
jump to, because of the time, jump to the Q&A, and this is a really interesting question. Like, I love it, from Barbara. How can we get employers to recognize overseas experience? Who would like to answer this question?
I think for me, it's it comes down to the employers individually. So there is, it depends on your personality. Some employers are so focused onto having the qualification, ensuring that, you know, you have just this qualification, they are escaping or they forgetting about the transferable skills that the person might bring from a different industry, you know, having worked in, you know, and I'll use myself as an example, okay. It escapes me now, you know, the amount of people that I worked with is a right example. I'm an engineer by profession, and currently I am working with, you know, New Futures as an employment, you know, program manager. Previously, you know, for the past 15 minutes, that's what I've done. It's about, you know, finding what this person has to offer. You know, there's a lot of, you know, jobs that has, you know, no requirement in terms of, you know, qualification, you know. Of course, if it's engineering or, you know, others, it might be a bit difficult. However, there is areas where they can actually be very beneficial, be very, you know, an add-on to your organization because of, you know, the skills that they bring, the knowledge that they bring, the exposure that they bring, you know, the beliefs, you know, all of that. So if you know, we've spoken today about, you know, all of those barriers. You know, I'm a woman, I'm a Muslim, I'm African, you know, I'm an engineer who hasn't worked. So you put that all together and I still managed to get a job. And I tell people, you know, this is what you need to do. How can you think about, you know, the barriers? Stop thinking about the barriers, think about, you know, the benefits. You know, these people will bring you the right, you know, I guess, you know,
be yourself and think about what you can to add, and there are a lot you can to add, definitely. Muhammad, I saw you turned off your microphone for this question. Do you have anything to add?
I wanted to answer the second question, but I'll just add one little thing. I think Maha covered it mostly, is from the point of view of someone who is trying to figure out And again, I'm answering the way because I know a lot of employers and people working in the employment settlement, employment service space are here. When someone comes to you and says, someone who's 50 or 60 years old and say, I was an engineer for 20 or 30 years and I want to be an engineer, you could say, yes, we'll work on that and spend 10 years until they are an engineer again and when they're 70. Or you could think about everything else that they have. And just like Maha mentioned, they could be a consultant tomorrow. They don't need to be an engineer. So sometimes it's also about providing a vision for someone and showing them other opportunities that exist, utilizing their management of people, their management of time, their management of resources, the other skills that they bring.
Sure, thank you. Another question from Kelly. What's the best way to approach multicultural communities, organizations across local government areas to assess education, training, employment needs of their community? Abdi, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, thank you very much, Shabazz. I think it comes to forming the partnerships, and it's going out there and meeting people in person rather than sending emails. You know, I get 20, 30 emails a day from various recruitment agencies, and I often don't respond because I am busy working with people who are saying, look, we want to come over, have a meeting with you, assess what your community needs are, and form a partnership. And we have a 7 formal partnerships for employment, La Trobe University included. And there's 2 aspects of that. One is about what are the gaps in the skill set and what do we need. So we do, for example, with the La Trobe University, employability workshops with the community members, things from resume to cover letters to mock interviews. And then we have panels like this where we invite senior leaderships to come and join. So that's the formal form of approach that's required, a meaningful engagement to the community to say, this is what we can do, this is what you can do, and this is what we can do together. So I think that is the formal approach. The other issue is we get, again, as with the previous session with the Indigenous community, I think it was Liz who said that, or Sarah, who said that, Sarah, who said that, you know, we're beyond the entry level and traineeships and, you know, certificates and the trainings. There's only so much you can do before young people say, look, when am I going to get a job? I can't go from training and education to another. So I say have the end in mind before you actually start. So there's no point, for example, with a lot of young people doing a pre-up traineeship in electronics and plumbing, because there's not enough apprenticeships. There are a lot of young people who did that and they can't get into plumbing or electrician because those are the 2 licensed trades, and there's real challenges. So you don't want to be training and then not being able to have an outcome.
Thank you, Abdi. Prasant, do you have anything for this question? So I can remind you, what's the best way to approach multicultural communities organization across local government areas to assess education, training, employment need of their community?
So I think just like as Abdi Aziz mentioned, you should be knowing the local job active providers or organizations that deal with multicultural communities and approach them directly face to face. Sending emails cannot be I think very effective, but going in face to face, booking an appointment and then discussing about your opportunities and programs, trainings face to face, and seeing and a consultant who deals in the specific areas and speak to them directly. And that's the best way, I think, to access these facilities.
Thank you very much. Last question before heading back to Philippe. It's particularly for Maha, this one. So it says, Maha, you mentioned people sometimes feeling overwhelmed with many appointments from different services. What are your thoughts on how people can navigate their obligation with job active while also participating in programs such as Reconnect or Giving the Chance?
Okay. So for
Do you want
programs,
me to read it again or?
no, good. I read it as well. Thank you. So I guess for that question in particular, providers or programs such as Job Active is, we can't avoid them. You need to receive your payment, so therefore they must attend it. It's about us understanding, their needs. The other programs, what we don't understand is, when we assess the client, if they don't disclose mental illness, we don't think they have mental illness, but the client themselves have been through a lot. We come from cultures where mental illness is not an education. We don't know of it. We don't acknowledge it. So therefore, if you tell me I'm mentally sick, okay, or I have a depression, that I'm crazy. As simple as that. So it's about, knowing what activities they have. So having a conversation with them, understand, all of the programs and all of the obligation they have, and, help them navigate it, ensure, that we are connected to those providers, remind them of their appointments and say, so what have you done? Do you want me to speak to your consultant, and help you through your job search? We can remain in the system, two of us. However, we need to work together to help, because the outcomes that the Job Active wants is employment. The programs, that they want is settlement, employment. You're not settling in a country without employment. That's the last station of your, train journey. So it's about us working together, okay, to help, Muhammad needs a job, but he has 10 million appointments that has to attend. There is no point of me taking him out of class to attend my appointment. I'm wasting his hours of English. I'm wasting his, time, because he's not learning, focusing on the job search. So it's about understanding the difficulties, understanding how we can actually make it a smooth transition for him so he can benefit from the two programs.
Thank you very much. Before heading back to Philippe, thank you, Abdulaziz. Thank you, Maha. Thank you, Mohammed.
Sorry, Shabazz, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there was another question that was posed in the Q&A at a point. It was answered in written form, but I wouldn't mind just actually bringing it to everyone's attention because it was touched on a little bit by some of the panelists about this issue of self-employment. Self-employment and entrepreneurship. We have in the audience Ari Moses, who's the state manager of an organisation called Thrive Refugee Enterprises, which is a not-for-profit organisation that supports economic and social integration of refugees and asylum seekers, and runs workshops to help build capacity for people to become self-employed. So the question that was put by Ari was, do you think the communities you represent see entrepreneurship and self-employment as a viable alternative to conventional employment? I believe, Abdulaziz, you did post a written response to this. Just want to maybe share with us what your response to that question might be.
Thank you very much, Phil. Look, self-employment is actually one of the creative ways that the community is creating employment. As I referred to earlier, they are businesses, and if you look at the businesses that are run by the Somali Australian community now, they employ more women from our community than state government, federal government, local government, and the private sector combined. And they do that, as was previously said by the Indigenous panel members, because they feel culturally safe, they're inclusive, and women can work at times that suit them, so they don't have to compromise their family life. So they can drop off their kids 8:45 at school, finish work at 3 o'clock so that they can go pick their kids at 3:30. That's flexibility that it enables. But these jobs are also in areas where there is a minimum requirement for language. If I give you an example of where we're based in West Heidelberg, the West Heidelberg Mall, there are 13 Somali-owned businesses just in this small shopping center, from restaurants to money transfer to hairdressers to clothes shops and cultural foods. And it employs combined about 50 people from our local community members. I think that's where the future is. And now there's an opportunity in the disability sector and through NDIS, where there is scope where we can upskill, train our community members so that they can work with community members that share their culture, their language, you know, their meals and all the rest. So that's why I think there should be a focus on resourcing. But the biggest challenge that faces called community businesses are they lack the networks, and they have barriers to market access. So you can have a business and you can put hard hours into it, but you need to be able to access. If you give, for example, the disability sector, for example, as an example, there needs to be a connection with the agency so that people from our communities or the called communities are not just referred to the mainstream organizations, or working with mainstream organizations so that they could also refer people. And for the interest of disclosure, I do run an NDIS business apart from my day job here at Himilo. And these are the areas that we can, restaurants, catering, cleaning, you know, a labor hire, you know, areas that doesn't require a lot of skills, but require and doesn't require a lot of language, but they can add value and employment created. So I think that's the solution. I think the future is to have employment so that more people can be employed by the community, for the community, as we had with the Indigenous community. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Abdiaziz. And just to close the loop on that question, that Thrive program has been looking for participants for those workshops. Darebin Council has actually been supporting that program. So if there is anyone, not just amongst the panel members or amongst the audience today, who is interested in finding out a little bit more about that program, please feel free to reach out either to myself or to Ari. Ari's details are in the chat room. So thank you to our multicultural panel and to Shabazz for doing a great job as the facilitator. Some amazing insights in there, some very sobering statistics also that really struck me, particularly the number of years that people from newly arrived backgrounds remain unemployed. That was quite frightening in a way. So this last little bit, so what we want to do with this last section is to approximate something that looks like networking. You know, if we were all together in a room, you might have thought, I'd like to go and talk to that person. I'd like to give that person my card. I'd like to make a connection there, maybe get a phone number, and you'd walk across and you'd shake their hand, or you'd engage them in some conversation. Obviously, we're limited in doing that in the format that we're doing it. But what we can do is encourage people once again to pose questions in the Q&A room. But what we also can do is we can encourage maybe a bit of a spin around and encourage our panel members to ask questions of the audience. There are many people in the audience with some strong backgrounds in a lot of the areas that other people have been talking about this afternoon. So maybe I'll ask perhaps if Delia and Sarah, if you're still with us, if you could also turn your cameras back on, because you know, there may be an opportunity for you to engage with some of these conversations. And before I get to that, I'll just point out some of the people that we do have in the audience, just so it sets a bit of context, and people may want to sort of ask questions of each other rather than asking questions of the panel. So we've got some of the new kids on the block. We've got some jobs advocates, a new program that the state government has brought in. These people support job seekers directly. Darebin Council has engaged jobs advocates. We have 4 working with us in a partnership program with the City of Moreland. 2 of them are with us today, actually helping out, Ebrima and also Lisa. And there was also Skylar O'Shea, who I notice is in the room. We also, there are other programs such as the local jobs coordinator programs. And we have Melissa Kalemis, who's here as well, who posed a question earlier. The local jobs program is a federal government initiative. They've been really helpful to me, I've got to say, in providing me with a lot of backgrounding and connections to some of the Department of Education and Employment programs and contacts. There's also, of course, the some of the new JVES programs. Maha is part of one of those. There are other JVES programs or Jobs Victoria Employment Service programs. There's one that we're engaging with through the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, and we have representatives here. And there are others that run by organisations like Northlink. And there are skills and jobs programs. Skills and jobs programs have been around for a while, doing the work that many of these new partners are going to be doing. So there's some good partnership opportunities there. There's also group training organisations. I think we've got Adrian in the chat room here today. Training providers such as the Learn Locals and Melbourne Polytechnic, and not to forget employers, and particularly employers and businesses that are owned and operated by Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people and people from a multicultural background. They're all here today. So feel free to engage and chime in. So if members of the panel would like to actually pose a question to someone in the audience, or generally to the audience members, we can actually work a bit of magic. If, say, an audience member wants to put up their hand to answer a question, we can invite them onto the stage. And we can get them to answer live to camera. So is there anybody who would like to pose a question of somebody else? Yes, Mohammed.
All right, break the silence. Look, I'm really interested to look at this from the other side and really, instead of always thinking we have to conform to what the system is and deal with the limitations of the system. I mean, we should do that always, but there's always opportunities to change the system and break the system and recreate the system based on what we need it to be. So I'm really interested, especially through the work that I do with either the VMC or the ECCV, and work with government, and also kind of through the redesign of the settlement program with the Department of Home Affairs federally and others, and DJPR in Victoria. I'm interested to hear about any challenges that the current system may provide, and any modifications from a regulatory point of view that may need to happen. So, like from an advocacy point of view, what should we change? What should we go back to department and say these are the kind of things that are not allowing us? And I've got a lot of answers to this question, but from your point of view, what are the things that need to change that allows you to do better service delivery to cold or to an Indigenous population? Thank you.
So what sort of an organisation or a person would you be looking for a response to that question from, Mohammed?
Especially the, I'll say, employment service providers that run programs. I mean, whether it's Job Active federally or the JV and the other DJ.
So do we have anyone from the audience who would like to take up that question and respond? If not, then I might actually point to someone and ask them to respond. But rather than do that, if you would like to volunteer, all you have to do is click the raise hand button on the bottom of your screen. If you hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen, you'll see a little function that says raise hand. And that's a way that you can actually get involved. Anyone? Well, I am going to point out someone, if it's all right with them. I'm going to ask perhaps Angus Blackburn from Brotherhood of St. Lawrence to respond to that. Angus, are you happy to respond to that question or that point?
Yes, I'd love to. It'd be great if I could get a repeat of that question though, Philip.
Great, go for it, Mohammed.
Angus, good to see you again.
Hi, how are you?
For 2 years ago. So really, I'm interested in what would your request for kind of government be to make the system work better for you, to deliver better services for your clientele? What kind of advocacy maybe you want from us in terms of kind of changing the way the system is designed and works to make your job easier?
That's a huge question, isn't it? And I think, you know, the government is already doing a lot, and we talk government, we're talking state government, obviously Commonwealth government. We work closely with the state government, and they are very responsive to the advocacy that we're currently doing. I guess, you know, it's multifaceted, isn't it? It's sort of, we as an organisation, and it's, you know, I've been reminded from this forum today that we need to be consulting with the communities that we represent, that we're working with, and we also need to represent that to our funders, to the government. You know, I think some of the things that are successful that have been funded is this Jobs Victoria Employment Service. I think it's been, you know, really inclusive, and I think that inclusivity has been really part of its success. There's a large group of people in the Victorian community that don't have access to other services without JVS, so that's you know, that's been a very positive thing. I think they need to keep making progress on allowing more access to those entry-level positions, particularly those sort of traineeship and apprenticeship positions. There's sort of there is an incentive there to some degree when fees are waived, but it doesn't really compare to the funded places that other job seekers have available. You know, I'm sure there's other things to mention, but those are the things that come to mind. I think of, you know, that while asylum seekers or people seeking asylum have been included in this JVS round as they were in the JVAN, there are other people on temporary visas that have been in the community now for a long time that are really struggling also. And I think, so there's, you know, a lot of that group are probably going to continue to be in the Victorian community struggling as they are. And I think that there needs to be more attention paid to that. Those other visa types at this point are not eligible. That's
great.
all I've got for them.
Thank you, Angus. That was great. Appreciate it, and sorry to put you on the spot. So any other panel members would like to address a question or raise a point with our audience members? Bearing in mind, go on.
Yeah, so Phil, if I may, I might address this question to Aria in terms of their refugees and investments. What are some of the major investments that you have done, and can you share one or two examples of success stories?
So that question is being addressed to Ari Moses. So if we can perhaps invite Ari to respond. Are you there, Ari? Might be just trying to unmute his microphone. Yes, he's there.
Yeah.
Go for it, Ari.
Sorry, I was slightly distracted because I had a text message from a client. Can you repeat the question?
Go for it, Abdi.
Yep, Ari, the question was, can you share with us some of examples of investments that you've worked with or business that you have worked with within the multicultural communities, and one or two success stories that you might be able to share with us?
Yeah, I'll be very brief so that I don't hog the space. Look, we have two types of loan packages, so to speak. We have a package where clients bring their own business idea to us, and we work with their business idea. And then we also have what we call a business in a box, which is really where clients, in a way, buy their own jobs, because they're buying into a franchise situation. One is with Australia Post for couriers, where the franchise is free. There's no charge for buying into a courier ship with Australia Post. And if you require the van, which is what you need to have for Australia Post, then we'll provide the finance for it. If you don't, if you already have a van, then that is white, then that's fine. We'll make the contact and all the other arrangements. So there's no loan, but that's okay. The other one is a cleaning. You buy into a cleaning franchise and it's guaranteed income even during the current pandemic. So we managed to negotiate with this company that they'll get guaranteed income that they signed up for, whatever the level is, from $1,000 to $12,000 a month, even during a lockdown period. So they're the two business in a box. And then anything, we work with everything really, taxis, Ubers, retail shops, mainly, you know, we've had any number of Middle Eastern grocery stores, catering businesses, tradies, any of the, pretty much all the tradies, from painters, decorators, fencing, roof tilers, you name it. The only businesses that we don't work with, one is the sex industry. So anything related to the sex industry, we won't fund, even if nothing to do with the businesses being legal or illegal. There's an area that we won't get into. And the other one is the gambling industry. So anything to do with gambling, we won't look at either. So, and we've had a couple of, in the period that I've been with Thrive, which is about 3.5 years, we only had a couple of applications in that genre. But, yeah, so they're the two areas of business that we won't touch. Pretty much everything else we will touch. And we've had any number of success. I've got in the northern suburbs near Darebin, I have a Syrian refugee couple. They've now been in Australia for 3.5 years. They opened their business 2.5 years. So in less than 12 months of being in Australia, they started in Sydney, they moved quickly back to Melbourne. So in 6 months, they researched, they fitted out the shop, they searched their suppliers. Anyway, to cut a long story short, they opened in March 2019. They're extremely successful. They have now saved enough money from the profits of their business to put about 30% down deposit on a house. So, you know, they're a young family, lost everything in Aleppo. And yeah, you know, but we've got many success stories.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ari. That was a great answer and a really good question. Would anyone else like to have a go from the panel? Sarah, do you have anything? Oh, Shabazz, you're about to jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. I would like to ask a question. Because this is a great opportunity to have all these experts together now. As a local government authorities, like as a Darebin Council, what would you suggest for us to do to improve the access to employment opportunities to cult and multicultural communities? What are some of the suggestions that you have in mind? What we can do better? Just a very broad, big question, we will try to take them all into consideration, really.
And that question can also be answered by members of the audience, not just members of the panel. If there's someone amongst our audience who would like to answer that question, feel free to raise your hand, and we can invite you to the stage. I see a hand go up, but I can't see who it's actually from. Oh, there it is, Abdi.
Yeah, that's me.
There you are.
Thank you, Eric. Look, great question. For me, what I always do is, you know, having conversations with either businesses or governments to have policies in place that actually designate jobs for called communities. You know, I've been reading the comments in relation to the action plan for Darebin from the mayor, and that really sounds very, very strong and very, very positive. And I say that it's important to have it in action plans and policies, because too often what happens is we work with individuals on good faith to create employment pathways for individuals and cohorts, but that person who is working with us on good faith moves on, resigns, either retires or resigns from the job, and then we start from zero. We have to build relationships with agents and the government departments to do. So it's good to see that it's actually written into the action plan for employment. But I don't know whether this is a part of the Darebin Council, but the Banyule Council example is really good. I remember 5 years ago having a meeting with the then CEO of Banyule Council and asking how many Somalis work for the council. And from that conversation took time, but now we have designated paid internships at the Banyule Council for Indigenous, people with disability, and Somali Australian community members. And that leads to permanent jobs within the council or a bit more longer term. But what it provides is, it provides confidence, networks, experiences, and referees for the young people who are there, and then they go on to build a successful career. So if that already doesn't exist in Darebin, I think that might be one of the ways that you called communities can be assisted with, where you create an equity and inclusion for called communities. And they can be entry jobs because there's a lot of university graduates, but what that provides is they provide young people with their first job, paid job, and there has to be a wraparound support at that person, as Sarah was saying earlier in the Indigenous ones, where you support the person to thrive in their role, build the confidence, and be part of that organizational culture. So, you know, I can't stress enough the importance of having designated inclusion policies that actually translates into tangible and numbers, you know, something that you can actually feel, touch, and see.
Great. Great answer. Thanks, Abdi. I'll come to you in just a minute, Abrima. I noticed you've got your hand up. Just wanted to let everyone know that Liz Allen has rejoined us. Liz, just to let you know, what we're doing here is we're kind of flipping things around a little bit and giving panelists the opportunity to ask questions of the audience and getting a bit of interaction going that way. So thanks again for coming back in. Abrima, I believe you wanted to respond. Abrima Sarr has come on board as a jobs advocate with the City of Darebin. He's been with us for just a couple of weeks now, settling into the role. But Abrima, did you want to respond to that point?
Yeah, I would like to respond to Shaba's
you can turn your camera on if you like.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the, because based on my experience working in different council for people from Kal community, so it's very hard for them to enter council because always the outcome is you don't have enough experience. So if you don't give someone an opportunity, so how do you expect that individual to have experience? And then secondly, you look at council human, like HR teams. So maybe one good thing is it should be balanced. So you have, at least if every interview panel, there is someone who is from a CAL background in this interview panel. So there will not be a comparative disadvantage to people, applicants from CAL community. But if you have, an interview panel where you have all Australians, who have, some of these people, they have no understanding of the experience of people from CAL background, and then they are competing with Australians. So at the end of the day, so then, like you attend an interview, you have all the qualification, as one of the panelists said, you went to school here, you have all the qualification, and then you apply for the same job with Australian. But because all the, those who are doing the interview, are all Australian, so there is no one from a CAL background who doesn't have, the same experience or the understanding from that individual, then they miss out, because then, you know, there is already, you know, a disadvantage for that individual, because he doesn't have anyone in the panel who understand his or her experience. So this is why it is, you know, very, you know, hard, you know, for people from CAL background to, you know, gain council employment. So maybe moving forward is, you know, to try to diversify, you know, the human or HR of councils, so that at least every interview panel, there is someone from a CAL background who sit in this panel who can understand. If maybe if there is language barrier, then he can, you know, help, or she can help understand, you know, explain to other members of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Abrima. That was a great response. I really appreciate that. We'll move to wrapping things up fairly soon, because the Zoom room will disconnect us at 4:30, but let's see if we can finish before then. Liz, did you have anything that you would like to add, or anything you would like to you ask of the people in attendance?
I don't think so. I did get kicked out earlier, so I didn't rejoin for a while. But
very sorry about that, Liz.
Yeah. It's all right. I didn't take it personally. What I heard as well from you know, our friends talking about coal communities and migrant and refugee communities is there's a lot of similarities in terms of, you know, Aboriginal engagement and participation as well. And what I echo, I guess, what Abdiziz has said as well, you know, it does take really strong leadership and commitment, and I guess a journey, you know, from executive directors and, you know, resourcing not just the individuals, but the organisation to understand this. So, you know, it's everyone's issue. Yeah, that's probably all I can add in terms of that. But, you know, again, people are willing and have really good intentions. And I think, you know, just asking questions really helps to navigate this space. In terms of, you know, qualifications and experience, no matter where that is, my understanding from employers is that there's only a few core things that they need, and that is reliability. Someone that's, you know, happy to turn up on time and prepared to undertake any skills and development and training that they need. In terms of qualifications, often it's that stuff can be learned. It's the attitudes and the willingness of, you know, any job seeker that an employer should be really looking at, I guess, and what they have as an individual to contribute to diversity in the workplace. Yeah, but I can go on. I'm pretty passionate about this area for a while, so I could go on, but just echo those kind of few things. Yeah.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks for your passion. It's been on show for a good long time. We've sort of known each other and known of each other for quite a while, and that's never been diminished. So look, I think we might sort of move towards wrapping this up. There's a few closing things I just wanted to mention. The main one is to thank everybody for your attendance, to all the people who joined us as attendees, to all of the panel members. Appreciate everything that you've done, the time you've set aside, noting the difficulties and the challenges we've had at getting this up and running. So thanks again for all of that. Thank everyone for being a part of what we do. There's a couple of questions, a couple of concerns during the process of today about contacting and connecting with each other. The details that you've posted into the chat room, your contact details, etc., won't be recorded as part of the recording of this program, but all of that information will be collected, and certainly the contact details that you've shared when you registered, we'll be able to, excuse me, to share that back. So if there are people that you saw or heard from that you would like to make contact with, we'll be sharing that information with you over the coming days. So don't panic too much about that. But also, if you don't get that information and there's still other people you'd like to get in touch with, you can always reach out to me or to Darebin Council, and we can work on that for you. Also, I just want to just say, don't let this be the end of the discussion. This is, you know, the figures in this room have been having these conversations for a long time. I understand that, and that's been pointed out. And we want these conversations to continue, but we also want to see action coming out of these conversations. So now that we have a lot of new people involved in the employment sector, particularly around Darebin, and we have the willingness from employers, and we have also the kind of the bit of the poking to employers that's come about through things like social procurement frameworks and social inclusion policies. These are the people you've been hearing from this afternoon. These are the people you need to connect with. This is the stuff you need to think about, and these are the ways you need to act. So please turn what you've heard this afternoon into action. I wish everyone all the very best. Challenging times for all of us. Stay safe, stay healthy, everyone. Support each other. And I would just finish by, because I work for the economic development team here at Darebin Council, encourage everyone to support your local businesses. You know, without business, there's no jobs. So support your local businesses in any way that you can. Thanks again. Go well, and we'll see each other again sometime. There will be another. Sorry, I forgot. There will be another one of these coming up probably around September time, when we'll focus our attention on young people and people with disabilities. So stay tuned for information about that one. But for now, thank you very much and good afternoon.